Okay, hello. Welcome one and all to yet another episode of WhickTV, cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues political and cultural from the silly to the serious. Gang, we are waiting on one more individual, but it's 3 past the hour and I like to be punctual. And so here we are, talk a little bit about slurs, but I have some bad news, perhaps? Maybe good news? 𝕻𝖎 here has a warning for us. 𝕻𝖎, can you kind of repeat what you just told me?
Should we wait until Rose gets on just so we can make sure that she hears the
Oh,
announcement as well?
maybe. Might be bad news. I'm not sure. It depends how much you like Twitch. It really does. We might, I guess spoilers, we might have to move. We might not be able to stream on Twitch, based on the content that we're going to be doing.
She's in the betting room.
I'll bring her in. But yeah, we might have to move to Kick and YouTube simply because of the content of the stream. Yeah, we'll see, right? Though. Hi, Rose. How's it going? Can you hear us?
Hi, it's good. Sorry I was late. I was taking a bath and it took a bit longer than I expected, so I'm here though.
It's fine. We're actually probably going to have to move from Twitch to YouTube or Kick to actually have this discussion. Let me give
Okay.
Let me give y'all links to my Kick and links to my YouTube in my chat, and this should give time for 𝕻𝖎 and anyone else who's streaming. If you are streaming on Twitch, you might want to try to transition at this point. Thanks for the Kick link, Jenny.
So even if you talk about it, it's a problem? I thought it was just if you said I could be totally wrong, but
I wasn't planning on filtering myself when I described the slurs and such.
okay.
In addition to Twitch has been very aggressive. They have a new TOS that's much more restrictive right now, and they've been enforcing it pretty strongly. So even talking about this subject could put people at risk of TOS violations.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand.
You got a camera for us today, Rose? While we're getting set up, we'll stay on Twitch and give people time. Yeah, you can check me out on YouTube, gang, at youtube.com/@WhickTV, or you can check us out on Kick at kick.com/WhickTV. But either way, you're probably gonna move because we're probably gonna shut the Twitch stream down because I don't want anyone to get in trouble. Least of all me. I don't want to take a hit, but this topic does deserve a discussion. And luckily, I have more than one platform. So. You all need to transition, yes. And I won't leave you. I'm not leaving you. I'm just changing form. Okay. I'm not leaving you.
Transition again?
I'm transitioning. Yeah. This is my coming out stream. I'm transitioning from Twitch to YouTube and Kick.
I'm so happy for you, Wick.
You're welcome.
Not feeling Rumble.
Look, I guess I could. I just let me grow these before I start growing things. Like my YouTube is actually growing really fast. My Kick's struggling. I don't know what's with that.
Yeah, from what I've seen when it comes to Kick, it's either like you're already big, and I don't know the growth potential is there yet from what I'm seeing in terms of Kick.
Okay. Rose, you got a camera for us or no? And Doobie, if you want to put your frog on, that would be helpful.
I can work on it. I'll try, but I have like a new setup, so I'm still working that out. But we'll see what I can do.
Please. People like faces.
Oh, sure. I got my makeup on, so I don't.
Yeah. Take your time.
Indeed.
It's not like, we're waiting on any of you. Okay. I've given you guys enough time on the Twitch. So, if you haven't transitioned by now, I don't know what to tell you. We'll see you on the flip side. Feel free to give me some subscriptions before you go. That'd be great. But for now, I'll see you on Twitch and YouTube. Kick and YouTube. See you soon.
Does this work?
It works perfectly. Okay.
I had to move all my setup, but it works. So, and
Beautiful.
I didn't knock off the camera like I did when I was on Puffles' stream.
No, it looks good. We can hear you. We can see you. Everything's great. And yep, we have moved from Twitch, and we are now on Kick, YouTube, where the moderation is a lot less strict. And so hopefully we can have an honest and open discussion about this, because I don't want people to feel like they need to hold back because they don't want to get me in trouble. Okay, let me introduce the topic while Doobie gets ready. Okay, so we are going to be talking about slurs tonight. What constitutes a slur? When is it okay, or is it ever okay, to use a slur? In what context? Are there slurs that are okay and some slurs that are not? How do we know which is the difference? Should all slurs be just okay? If you are a part of a group, can you use a slur that is directed at your group, or should just no one be saying that slur anyway at any point? Should black people be able to use the N-word, for example? Soft A or hard R? There's a lot to this, and we're kind of going to get into it. But I wanted to give all of my guests a chance to introduce themselves, to give kind of an opening statement on what they think about slurs, and then we'll just get into the meat of it. Sound good, gang?
All right, sounds
Okay.
good.
We're going to start with Doobie. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I'm 𝕵𝖎𝖎. I run the politics server on Discord, and that's me.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on slurs?
Oh, I think that drawing racial lines around slurs, around which words you can say is racist. So I think it's a little bit silly to do that. I think that slurs are fine so long as they're not being used in a derogatory way. I think you can say any slur in a way that's funny, it's playful, and I think that's fine.
Hey, thanks for being here. I'm sure we'll get into it. First time guest on my show, but I've been on his show before. Hosted the Political Purple Broadcast, I think it's called. Purple Political Broadcast. I'm sure I got that wrong. Randall, go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Rudell. That's
Randall.
perfectly fine. No, you're good. I've been called so many different things, from Randall, Rodelio, Spaghettio, everything, bro. So I'm cool with it. But yeah, my name's Rudell. I'm the host of the Purple Political Breakdown, a new podcast making waves out here, trying to find political solutions without political bias. It sounds as interesting as I said. But in terms of my opening statement, I'm going to say pretty briefly, I don't really think there's a necessity for slurs to be used. I mean, I think there's a lot of terminology that exists in today's society that in a lot of situations you won't use it, or you won't say it because it's not needed. And I mean, the humor aspect, I think, is just a very lazy way for you to just be edgy. So I don't think slurs, even the N word, I know I'm black, even the N word, I don't think slurs are needed in society.
Okay, I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. 𝕵𝖎𝖎, what do you think?
Hi, so my personal opinion on slurs, I'll first of all introduce myself. I'm like a trans woman. I'm kind of controversial online, but in this specific instance, I'm looking at these people who claim to be leftists and then say these edgy or slurs in private. And I just my mind is like blown. Like, you call yourself a leftist, but you just say all these like crazy offensive terms and you just don't care. To me, it's the way I see it is this. These words, like, if you remove all social context, I can understand, but the social context is real. These words do have meaning. These words have historically been used in certain ways. And the reason that these people choose to gravitate towards these words is because of that context. And they'll hide behind it and be like, oh, well, it's funny. I just like it because it's so. There's no disconnection between what's going on and the stuff that people still face to this day. To me, there's just really no excuse to it. And also it's really weird if you're not like part of the group that it affects to just sit there and be like, well, I think it's fine, therefore you shouldn't have a problem with it. It's like, who are you to say that? It's just a bizarre thing that I've seen. Anyway, sorry, that was a little long.
We'll get into it. I'm curious to the details of this, but I'm sure we will get into it in the open. Next up, the person who actually brought me this panel. Yeah, Sonia.
It's all my fault, guys. Hi, I'm Zonia. I am a streamer and a shit stirrer. So yeah, this idea came up recently just because of a lot of things that have been kind of coming up in this in the mix of this whole thing. There was a bad faith clip chimping of 𝕊𝖐 𝖍𝖎𝖙 and Cenk Uygur that was done to paint them as being racist for verbally describing certain slurs in their reporting of other people who had said those slurs and like quoting them. And so it that kind of thing and what's recently been going on has been getting me thinking a lot about how sort of there's a contingent of people who are going out of their way to try to weaponize the taboo nature of certain words and slurs against people when they didn't even use it in a malicious fashion. They didn't use it as a way to try to denigrate anybody. It was used very innocently, or it was a slip up, or is some kind of contextual reason for using it. But it's being weaponized against people. And so I have a problem with that. And then I also have a problem with the in-group versus out-group, where a word is just commonplace usage with the in-group, but as soon as someone outside of the group uses it, suddenly it just magically becomes a slur. And that we all know what the key one that is I'm talking about, because it also gets put out there in a lot of media that is broadly consumed by the out group, right? And so it becomes a part of their culture in a way, in the way that they relate to the music and such in the media that is using that word. And but then another problem that I have with this whole thing as well is we don't really realize that the more taboo and off limits we make a word, the more power that word has over us. And that's something I'd also like to talk about at some point in this. And it's not that I would like expect people to not be bothered by certain words. It's fine. People are going to be bothered by it, but it's something that we should talk about and kind of recognize and explain how it is that the more that we try to contain a word and keep it from being said, the more that word has power over us. Right. And so that's something I would like to get out in this whole thing as well.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk about it. I guess I'd start the discussion simply by asking, so are you advocating that we use these words in so that we can dilute their power? Do you think that if we made it more common to use the N-word, for example, soft A, do you think it would take away some of the sting of it? Is that what you're advocating for here?
I think that's happening already. I think just this constant push from like a certain contingent of people to say that anybody who uses the word nigga are suddenly racist if they're not black. I think that's a problem right there. Now, if somebody wants to just say, hey, I don't feel comfortable with you saying that in my presence, that's fine. But I think this whole attempt to try and push that constantly and accuse people of being racist for saying it is stupid. And so I'm not going to say that people should be using the word nigga constantly and like saying it all the time with everything that they're doing, but this constant push to try to say that it's racist to say it if you're not black is stupid, and that's actually granting that word power over people. And so that's the kind of thing that we should kind of just care less about.
Well, you did warn me
to lose power. You should care less about it.
You did warn me you weren't going to censor yourself, so fair enough. For the purpose of this discussion, we'll just we'll go with it. What do you think, gang?
I saw the Rose's reaction.
So, luckily, for you, I'm not one of those emotionally invested individuals, so I don't inherently care, but I do understand seeing the word and what it's going to mean for a lot of black people who may be listening or who may be watching. I think for the most part, when it comes down to the N word, I do think it's a little confusing for people when, especially who has no kind of knowledge of the black community or what the black people have been throughout the years. It's confusing when certain people say it's a bad word and then they use it in a lot of different popular medias, whether that's music, whether it's a streamer, whether it's a content creator using it very casually and very friendly. That automatically gives the assumption that it's a good word to use, and for the ignorant, obviously they're not going to know any better. However, I do think that there is enough, and I think there's two ways you can approach it, but I'm going to start off with this. I think there's enough social context to understand what the word means and the usage of the word. So, what I mean by that is that when people use the word that are not black, there's enough understanding as of right now in American society and probably around the world too, that when you're using it, the interpretation for you using it is that you're going to be deemed as racist. So it's hard for me to see a person that is not black who's using the word, using it in a way to kind of push a movement or using it in a way to kind of break the status quo. What it seems to me is that they're using it to be edgy, using it to be funny. They're not using it in a very purposeful manner. As of right now in the black community, I don't think they're using it in a purposeful manner either. But at the very least, there's an understandable social context in how they use it. And then if you stray away from that as of right now, it definitely the outlook will be that you're racist from what we know of. And it's hard for me to say that you're anybody who's using it that way is going to be anything but automatically, because there's no other reason for you to use that word at that point in time.
Right, but there is
Like,
though. Right? So, like,
yeah, I was just gonna say, do you think that it's not? We'll let you go in a second, Dibby. Like,
yeah.
do you think that it's not going to end up influencing the person's own vocabulary and vernacular if they're constantly consuming media that uses that word in a very casual fashion? If you're listening to a lot of like Lil Wayne, he's dropping it constantly. He's got a whole song that's what real nigga roll call, right? Where it's like literally every other word. It's in all sorts of his songs, right? So that's going to influence people, even if they recognize that it's wrong for them as a non-black person to say that word. It's going to influence them. It may slip out if they're singing along the songs and stuff. It's going to their own vocabulary is going to adapt to that over time. You're influenced by all the stuff around you, the people around you, the culture around you, the media around you. It's hard to not actually have that become a part of your vernacular.
I want to give, well, I want Doobie to go, but I want to give space also. You can respond to that, obviously, but I want to give space to Rose as well. See what she thinks. But go ahead, Doobie, and then Rose.
Yeah, I think it's just the consequence of the normalization of that specific like black culture, type of black culture. I don't even think it's black culture. I think it's like just like urban city culture, right? There are plenty of
Call it
people growing
hip-hop
up.
culture.
Not even that. I mean, I grew up in East LA, not very hip hop. Lots of gangs in the area, right? Everybody said nigga, everybody said dog, everybody said vato, right? No matter what fucking color you were, right? So
That's
I think this
true.
is just
Growing
the
up here, Latinos were saying nigga all the time. So yeah.
yeah. So this is just this specific like subculture within the black community has been normalized through music, through entertainment, etc. So people are gonna hear slang that they're using, and they're gonna repeat it because it's gonna become, like 𝕍𝖎 said, it'll become part of their vocabulary. Right, it's just the way that they speak, and they understand the social context. Right, they're not saying it in a derogatory way; they're saying it to mean dude or friend or that guy or whatever the fuck. Just like the black people are when they're using it. Right, so they're using it in exactly the same way. I think the only difference there is the skin color, because the intention's the same. Right, the only difference is the skin color. And I don't think it makes sense to say, hey, because of your skin color, this word is, and despite you understanding the social context, despite you growing up speaking that word in a community that spoke that word, you can't say it because you're not black. I think that's really fucking racist.
You can respond if you want, Riddell, and then Rose.
I also wouldn't say so much that it's racist, or at least I don't think it comes from the intent to be racist. I think it comes from like, hey, you don't understand the lived experience, you don't understand our culture around it and such. But I don't think it really comes from like a racist perspective so much, or at least maybe I'm being a little overly charitable, but I don't think that comes from a racist perspective.
So when it comes down to the things that you're referring to, I definitely understand that part. I'm not excusing, but I understand the part when you're obviously living in certain communities, whether you want to call it hip hop culture, black culture, it doesn't really matter. Those communities are living in a very in a way that is very synonymous to the culture that is popularized it, of course. So understanding that, I grant you that, and I think that's a different conversation though. And the reason why I say this is because when we're referring to the worst use of the word slurs, we're referring to people who understand the social context, who are not part of the culture, as they say. And trying to stray it away from black culture is a little misleading as well, because I think there's a general understanding that it is black culture that popularized it. Now, these are not excuses, but I feel like these are important points to understand. And when we're referring to the use of the word the use of the N word, of course, we're trying to, at that point, open a floodgate to the point where we're saying this word should be used in other situations that are not part of the culture. So anybody that didn't live in the culture, anybody that's just listening to music, anybody in the work environment should be allowed to say it, because it's because people that are
Or right
not.
out, do you consider nigga to be a slur, like in the way that it's used in modern day? So
Yeah,
when black people are saying
I
nigga
don't
to each other, you think they're using a slur toward each other?
Oh, I think the word's a slur, and I don't think anybody should be using it.
And
I think
so you think that when someone says my nigga, they mean my like actual N-word hard R, like my nigger is what they're saying actually.
the
Right?
intentions versus my understanding of the word are completely different. I don't
Right,
think
but
people
words
should be using
change, right? The
words.
way that words are like used
Yeah.
change over time. So like we understand that
If it
today
means
the word is used
fro,
very differently.
if it means friend, bro, it becomes something. I've been in situations or in groups where it was used, even saying it to
But
me when
you're
I walk
speaking
in,
of
right?
very circumstantial situations. It doesn't necessarily mean friend or bro. Of
And
course,
it
the
can
It
people
also
depends on
in
mean
the
the
someone
context.
you're conflicting
community,
with, right?
may use it as word and bro, and that's why I'm talking about the confusion part. And I get the confusion part, but the just because the connotation has been changing for the most part, anybody who uses that word won't inherently just mean that they're saying friend or bro. You're opening a floodgate for something that we already understand.
Yeah, but this
That
is
if
like saying fucker, right? So someone says fucker to you, right? Oh, that fucker over there. Yeah, maybe they mean it in an aggressive way. Maybe they're just joking around. Someone calls you a motherfucker. Depending on the person and the context, they might mean it in very different ways, right? So like you just need to take the social context into account. I think typically when people are using this word, whether it's nigga or queer or faggot, or whatever the fuck it is, right? These are words that are used in certain communities, and not just by people within like the community itself, like the racial group or whatever, or the LGBT people, but people who've been exposed to these communities, who are around these communities. These are just words that are kind of absorbed through osmosis, and they become part of the vocabulary, right? So I think that's saying that actually removes a lot of the power from these words when they are used as slurs,
Okay.
right? So I think that
yeah,
encouraging
no,
people
hold on.
to like, sure.
Hold on. This is this got a lot. Okay. For my viewers, if this kind of stuff offends you, you might not want to watch this one. Just giving you a warning right now. I thought we were just going to be
𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜.
I'm just letting you know that this is going to be this
Hacky.
is going to be a thing. We are going to talk about it for this stream and this stream only. I'm not going to censor it unless you're in chat. If you're in chat, don't do that shit. You will get moderated. But for the purposes of this discussion,
What's a good
I
one for white
guess
people?
we're just gonna go.
I guess Cracker,
But-
but Cracker doesn't really have the thing that others do.
But
Monkey was
yeah,
a good one
I
when I was a
wanted
kid, but it's fallen
I want to give Rose some space here. Rose has been trying to get in, so Rose, go ahead.
First of all, I have a lot to say because a lot has happened. First of all, I want to acknowledge, like, a lot of people are probably going to look into this and think, like, who are you to be talking about this? You haven't been affected by this kind of stuff. And I completely understand that perspective. My personal thing is, like, as a trans woman, I know that there's, like, certain in-group stuff, like certain in-group community behaviors that if I notice, like, a cis person acting in that way, I would be, like, very weirded out by it. Because it's the sense that it's like this like bond through like our trauma and through our experiences, and no matter how hard someone thinks that they truly understand, they're not really going to have those same lived experiences. So the way that I personally see it is, it's like somebody who just says that word has this feeling that they're like part of this in-group that they're really not, and it really just kind of embarrasses everyone around them. And I think we can all acknowledge that there's like huge differences between somebody who says that word with like extreme, like blatant racial, racist like intent behind it, and somebody who's just like singing along to a rap song. Like, we can acknowledge that those are different things. I just don't think that just because they're different things that negates it. Because to me, it's this sense of, well, that this word is causing harm to other people. That all these people have these very strong opinions about it, but you choose to ignore that and choose to persist it in defiance anyway. And to me, that's just really like, that's like lacks a sense of empathy to me. And I
Is that a
just,
minimization
I
of what the
don't
harm is,
respect it.
of what the harm is and what it's been caused by? So to say that the word tranny is hurting trans people, that's bullshit, right? Tranny is a mouth sound. It means nothing. What's hurting trans people are the feelings and the policies pushed by people who say that word in a derogatory way. Right. So that's the actual thing doing the harm. The word itself is powerless. It only has power if you give it power.
Yeah, but the social context of it having power exists, and it will continue to exist.
So stop giving it power.
That's what I
Stop,
was
you're
saying.
contributing to
Are
that
you
social
using the
context.
IDOS argument right now? Are you really using
No,
the
no,
IDOS
you,
argument?
I don't know who that the fuck that is. You're the person. You're one of the people giving these things power. If you don't like them having power, stop giving them power. It's very simple.
Right.
And
So that's a very
Go ahead, Riddell. Riddell and then Zonia.
sounds good. Yeah, that's a very easy thing to say, but we just know that's not how the world works. Now, I want to point something
It is
out.
though.
No, it's not. But I want to point something out in terms of like when it comes down to the word, because I want to make this distinction. I am not one of those people who thinks people should generally be condemned just because they use the word. Like, I saw this article, someone used it and they lost their college admission. Yeah, that's going too far. So I'm not one of those people. I'm also not one of those people who also thinks that people should be using it in a casual way, because that's when you confuse people. The confusion part is the big broken part right now. I'm one of those people who thinks that everybody should just not use it and then just use different vocabulary because there's millions of words inside the modern language. So when it comes down to conversation, we all understand that there are so many different types of words that you don't use in certain scenarios and different situations. And when you're behind closed doors, then fine. I mean, I'm not one to police you when you say certain things in conversation. But when you use things very casually, what it can potentially do is open up the floodgate that I was referring to earlier, to the point where a person could use the word very casually in a different scenario, in a different setting, especially if they don't have enough perspective and experience to understand the potential consequences of the word, not necessarily based off anything legal, obviously, but based off potential emotional reactions that we understand that humans may do in a certain scenario. Then they say it, then they get their ass kicked, and then what? What are you going to say? The word had no power? The word definitely has power. I do think we should depower it, but not depower it by keep on using it, depower it by not using it in its entirety.
So I think that this idea that
the problem is when something is avoided, right? Think of the Voldemort problem, right? The thing that you don't mention is the most powerful and the scariest thing that there is, right? It's the thing that you are afraid
I never
to say.
said don't avoid it, but go ahead.
Yeah, but it moves in that direction because that's inevitably what's going to happen. These things don't tend to operate in ways that are more like gradual. I mean, when there's such a social conscious around it, it's really hot and cold. It's either it's okay to say it or it isn't okay to say it. And if it isn't okay to say it, there's always a whole bunch of people there ready to demonize all the people who do say it. So you're not going to get this whole with something with this much attention on it, you're not going to be able to get everybody to just kind of stop using it unless you stop caring about them using it, and then it loses popularity over time because it doesn't really have the impact anymore. But because of the fact that a word like nigga happens to be a very referential kind of cultural thing, not just exclusive to black people anymore, but broadly to hip hop and urban culture, as 𝕵𝖎 was pointing out, it becomes a relational thing. And so much of our interactions these days in this world are so integrated with cross-cultural references, memes, media, what anime you're watching, what music you're listening to. So much of people and as the broader culture is relating to these things across these lines. And a word like that is very much part of that culture and doesn't really have any kind of boundaries anymore. It's whoever is part of that culture and lives as part of that culture into a lot of the hip hop, into a lot of the more, urban aesthetic and such, right? So you're not really going to stop it. So what my thing is, if you really want to take all the power away from it, you kind of have to stop caring about it. That's what's really going to drain the power.
Yeah,
of
I think this,
and then it just becomes a word.
Yeah, I think this idea that if you say nigga around a black person, he's gonna beat you up or something. Yeah, I think that in itself, not only does that enable
He will if he's got
people
twisted tea on him.
Not only does that enable people who would do that kind of shit, that leads to a terrible stereotypes of the black community, but I think that stereotype itself is fucking racist. think this idea that that black people have so little self-control, if you say the naughty word around them, they're immediately going to attack you and get themselves put in jail, is fucking nuts, right? That's actually fucking racist to push that stereotype and or to encourage that behavior, right? I think that. So you
Wait,
said
can
that,
I ask, Doobie? Because
Sure.
I think we have very different opinions here. Do you think that it's a? Let me ask this. Why is it a bad stereotype that if you insult someone heavily,
it's not an insult.
it is often used as an insult, however, right?
No, hold on. Niggas used extremely rarely. Typically, the people that are going to say nigga as an insult will just say nigger.
No
right?
one
Why would they say nigga?
Well, there's
plausible
I've
deniability.
But
I've never seen. Okay, so here. Let me explain what I mean. I've never heard or seen. I've never heard or seen of anyone, right, getting beat up for just referentially using it, referentially softing, using it in songs.
That's
just
not true. I can point to tons of
I
music
have
videos.
never.
I pointed to a 2-hour panel where like 5 black people explained to me that if anybody ever said it around them,
I haven't actually seen it happen. However, I can point to you videos of someone using it as an insult where they do get the shit beat out of them. And now again, violence not good. That's not a good thing. But it's not exactly like I can also point to you where white people who feel insulted strongly enough will go and throw fists, right?
What? Okay, so
go ahead. 𝕾𝖎𝖎, then Riddell. 𝕾𝖎𝖎, then Riddell.
Okay. So I'm kind of in between on this because I've definitely seen people who very much are doing like the emphasizing when they're saying it, trying to basically get away with it if anybody wants to call them on saying nigger, but they're not saying it, so they're saying nigga, right? And they're using it with emphasis to kind of point to the person in the room who recognizes what it is that they're saying, that yes, I'm trying to call you a nigger, right? They're sort of emphasizing the way they say it to suggest it to them, so that everybody else in the room who's paying attention, it slides in under the radar because they're not paying, they're just hearing nigga, not nigger, right? So it definitely can be used. It could be used in a way to try and sneak in the hard R under the radar. But one thing I also want to touch on for Rose, which you mentioned earlier, I would ask you, Rose, like, why do you care if somebody embarrasses themselves by trying to pretend that they're part of a culture or in-group that they're not? That's on them. We all know wannabes. They can fuck their own lives up if they want, right? If they look and act like a charlatan, appropriating a bunch of culture but not actually coming from it, not understanding it, that's fine. We can laugh at them, but who cares if they do that shit? So I wanted to push that back on that point.
I want to hear Rose's response to that question, then I'm going to toss it to Riddell here.
For it.
Yeah, because sorry about that. To me, it stems from like a place of ignorance. And I feel like there's a lot of ignorance that comes from this. And I feel like I want to touch on something else that you said, right? Or just something in general. I feel like the normalization of this word, it just propagates and spreads it. And it's like, I don't think that anybody really should say it, but obviously there is a difference between like somebody who is part of that group saying it and someone who's outside of the group. I don't think it's great to have, it be like propagated throughout media, because then that just increases the amount of usage towards the term. And as with many of the consequences of the internet, it just has become desensitized. And I feel like a lot of like pro people will say, well, it's a good thing that it's desensitized. It does not have the power. But that's because people think that this false idea that we're in like a post-racist society or something, that we've moved past it, that we could just forget that this stuff ever happened. When I feel like we look at the world around us and we can see so clearly that like the roots of all this stuff are still very much there. And because that's still the case, that you can't claim that suddenly these words don't have power anymore and just like, leave it clean and use that as like a justification for yourself. To me, and why do I care that if like somebody's not in that group, and because it's more than that. It's hard to explain, but it's this, I don't know.
It's not that hard to explain, actually. You just think it's a Voldemort word, and if you say it around black people, they're gonna be sad. Right. So you'd like to save them as a good white.
Look, I didn't expect all these M-bombs to be dropping. So
can I ask a question really quickly?
I need to go to the bathroom.
Just the idea that like you can't just change.
Before
Riddell, I have 2 things I have to respond before I forget. And then you ask your question, of course. So the first thing was something that 𝕾𝖎𝖎 said in terms of the word. In order to desensitize the word, you would have to keep on using it until nobody cares. Yeah, I mean, I personally completely disagree with that notion. Now, I'm under the for me, when it comes down to it, I think there are a lot of words that people just don't need to use. And if the understanding that you don't need to use, there most scenarios, most situations that you're going to be in, the word is not necessary. If even with your when you're with your friends, you don't need to use the word when you're singing a song. I mean, I guess if that's the only one where I'm repeating lyrics, but that's a different situation in terms of normal conversation. So when it comes down to words and their usage, I mean, once it loses its meaning, it loses its meaning. And the best way for me when it comes to something loses its meaning is when that thing is forgotten in the history books, not when you keep on using it and hope everybody kind of stops using it. I don't think that makes any
Can I ask
sense.
you a question, Riddell, before I let Doobie ask his question? To that, in the society where we live, where everything is documented, archived,
Right.
analyzed, even if everyone today just stopped using the word or uh, it was erased from our vocabulary, there would still, like, it would never. I think we live in a post-forgetfulness society. And what I mean by that is, like, this will never be forgotten, right? The impact of the word
Right.
will never be forgotten. So, devil's advocate here.
No, go
Given
for it.
that that's the case, and that route is just impossible, should we not take the other route instead, which does have perhaps a chance of working? Of, we want this word to have less power, so to take it away, we just use it more?
So for me, and I do want to respond to something Doobie said before, and then obviously he can ask his question. So for me, when it comes down to it, when I'm saying that we stop using it and it's lost in the history books, I'm not being literal necessarily, because everything is documented, as you said, and everything will be referenced from understanding how society was to improving it for future use in terms of making a better society in the future. That is the goal of humanity, hopefully, is to create a better society continuously. So obviously we need the historical context on the progression of the word. But what I mean in terms of leaving in the history books is referring to its popularization in pop culture. If we understand, and this is something I believe the Black community has to take heed for. They need to, kind of lead the you know mission for, I guess the best way that I can say that is that they, when they're teaching next generation or telling other people about it, say you don't really need to use this word. You're a very educated individual. You know how to talk properly. If you want to talk to your friends, there are 10 other words that inherently, definition wise, actually mean friend, pal, buddy, and so on, and that are in every sense of the word. When you use that word in every context, it will mean what it means. It won't be misconstrued in any way. So at that point, once you use the word, or once you make people understand that it's a word that has no value in terms of its usage inherently, and if, I mean, this is hypothetical, obviously, but if as a Black community we make people understand we don't need this word, us Black people, we don't need to use the word, and then the pop culture popularity behind the word disappears, then all it's left is its historical context, and we need history. So I'm fine with that. And when it comes to something that Doobie said, and in terms of you know, uh, it being racist because a Black person may beat someone up or whatever. So my response to that is, one, I don't think enabling violence is ever the route. So I think that's not what I'm doing at the very least. I'm not saying you're saying I'm doing, but I want to point that out. And two, it's the natural response from the understanding of the social context. It's not necessarily enabling the action, but we know there's consequences that are not enabled morally, but there are consequences that will happen, as WhickTV elicited, based on certain responses or certain actions told or said to a person in a public space. That's human nature. There are definitely things when you're said, and it doesn't even have to be a slur, because Wick says if you just insult someone, if you go up to a bunch of people and you insult someone's girl in a very negative way, to expect them not to do
It
anything.
amuses me that you said you go up to a group of people and then you insult their girl as if they're separate categories, but fair enough. Go on.
Fair enough. So you expect that 100% of the time for them not to act is foolish. It's ignorant. That's not realistic. I'm not saying they should act, but they expect that they don't act doesn't make any sense. So we understand the social context. We understand that these words have power. We understand that the meaning is very ambiguous, but we know that there are certain conditions when words are used, especially when we know you're not part of the culture and you're using the word, the automatic assumption will be that you're racist. So you're actually just putting yourself, you're in a potential situation that is more harmful than good for you. And for what? To be edgy? It doesn't make any sense. To be comedic? It doesn't make sense. So that's why the word inherently has no value. I don't think black people should use it. And people who are not black, I think, should use it. And that's for all slurs. There's no value for these words in any situation. And if I grant you the song thing, then maybe, but there's no conversational way or reason you should use the word.
I think that's
I want to
Well,
just kind of like
Doobie's been
firm
trying
up
to
my
get in.
statement.
Okay,
Well, he
fair
said something about what I said earlier. I just want to clarify.
Please.
So
for it.
when right before I walked off to go to the bathroom, he said that that I was saying that it needed to be broadly used in order for the word to lose power. I was saying that specifically in the context of something that has so much social focus on it right now that I don't
Right.
think you can ever eliminate it. Right, the only way to really eliminate the use of it, to get it out of the common, vernacular or discourse, is to actually try and do a social push away from the use of it. But that means that you're granting that word all that power. So the only way it's really going to lose power is if you stop caring about it. And with the way the word is currently evolving right now, it would inevitably end up spreading the broader use and becoming more dilute and would lose power because it just becomes another word. It's not so
Okay.
much that I'm saying that people should use it more in order to dilute the power of it. I'm saying that with such a word like that and the way that it's currently going, it will inevitably go in that direction, and not caring about the use of it is the only way for it to really lose power. So inevitably it would become a broadly used term, just natural byproduct of the word and the way it's currently going.
So inherently, and then sorry, Doobie, you can go right
Okay, it's
after.
super concise because we do got to get some more people in here. But go ahead.
So inherently, when it comes to the practicality of changing the word and disappearing, that's going to be tough. But I do think anything technically is possible. But in terms of the idea that if you keep on using it, it'll lose its value, I completely disagree with that. I think there's a lot of terms that are not popularized in culture that if you use that word in a certain situations, that it'll immediately create a very, very negative response. So I don't agree with that. But I understand what you're saying.
Okay. So there are a few things. So first, I was going to say this earlier. I think I half agree with you, Red Al. I think that if we were talking about like just eliminating the use of the word at all, right, that would be the best way to stop using it. I just don't think it's realistic, right? I would compare that to something like kike, right? You don't hear Jews going around calling each other like kike or anything like this. People don't use a word, and when it's used, there's a very negative reaction, right? In any context, right? So I think that the fact that it's been reclaimed by the Black community and then reclaimed and then popularized, its usage has been popularized through music, through movies, etc., through comedians. I think it's a very different case, right, that we're looking at. I compare it to something like queer, right, which is also used in a derogatory way for decades, probably more than decades. And it was reclaimed in the same way that nigga was, right? They just said, "Hey, we're here, we're queer."
Yeah, personal anecdote. I still won't use that term.
Queer?
I won't because again, growing up, that was. I remember if you said that, you started a fight. If you called someone that, like it was super, super insulting, super derogatory. So I just naturally won't use it. Even though I understand that it has changed and evolved. I'm still very hesitant to use it. I will on occasion, but I'm very hesitant to even say it. I still have that kind of initial reticence, right? But anyway,
and so I think I'm around your age, Wick. Like I turned 35 like a week ago or something, right? And growing up, queer was seen as it's an insult no matter what context you say it in, right? So calling someone a queer is like one of the worst things you could do. So I'm not the kind of person that like is soft about language or whatever. But even still, because the culture that I grew up in saw that word as extremely negative, right, derogatory, I feel weird whenever I say it myself. In a way that I don't feel weird saying nigga, because I grew up saying nigga, right? Like everybody around me said nigga. So I don't have the same kind of like icky feeling about saying that word versus like queer. So I think back to wrap up the point that I was making, I think that it's kind of out of the box at this point. So either there needs to be like a massive cultural shift to stop using nigga at all in any context within the Black community, but also other communities that have adopted this word, and not just in the United States, but across the world, because people in fucking France and the UK are saying nigga because they're hearing it in our music, right? That we're exporting across the planet. I think that requires a massive culture shift that I just don't think is realistic. I think it's way more realistic to think that it would just become something like dude or bro. That's like, I think it's a word that people say. It's just seen as something that you say if you're kind of like, either you're very familiar with a person or it's considered more like a very casual, lower class kind of thing to do. Right? You typically wouldn't go in a business setting and call someone dude, right? So I think that's the realistic path forward for the word nigga, right? Now I think that to the point where there's like a social expectation or there's like a social understanding that saying nigga as a non-Black person is like negative. I agree with you, but I think that the problem isn't saying the word. The problem is a social expectation. I think that there's an expectation in the parts of the Black community, because I don't even think that like saying nigga is something that's accepted. I mean, you say you don't say it, right? Plenty of Black people don't say this word. It's a very like small not small. It's a subculture within the Black
Not
community.
small anymore. It used
Yeah.
to be older Black people who didn't like it, but it's really kind of fleshed out in culture over time.
Yeah.
So
what we're
yeah,
talking about is actually like a subculture within the Black community that uses this word in their day-to-day speak in like a friendly way, right, toward each other. So I think the expectation within this community, which also tends to be poorer, tends to be living in like the inner cities and have the rest of the things that come along with that culture, is that if you allow somebody to say it near you and they're not Black, then you're a pussy. You're a bitch. You let them walk all over you. And so the proper response is to hit them, or you're letting the white man or whoever the fuck talk down to you, right? Like I think that's the problem. And the same thing happens within like the Hispanic community. Right? I'm Hispanic. I grew up in East LA, and there were things like someone I remember watching my uncle beat the shit out of somebody, out of this Asian guy, because he called my uncle and his friends the essays, right? Like in like they're friends, right? They all hung out together, but the Asian guy said, "Oh yeah, where are the rest of the essays?" And my uncle beat the shit out of them for that. So like I think that's the issue, right? So like it's not that my uncle was actually offended by this. He called himself and his friends that and other things all the fucking time. It's just within the community, you were taught that if you let somebody say it around you, you're a bitch, right? So I think that kind of pride culture is a problem there.
All right, so I do understand a lot of the points that you're mentioning. Oh, did Rose want to go?
You can go first. I'll go after you go.
Okay, bet. So I do understand a lot of the things that you're saying when it comes down to it. The practicality of getting rid of the word is something that is a conversation. I think it's a different conversation, but I'm definitely do think a lot of things are possible when especially when you're kind of I think social media and content creators have a unique ability to kind of influence people to make, at the very least, help them understand that certain things um, probably could help society better than other things. But it's a tough process because of how popular it is. And like you mentioned earlier, the popularity around it and what people usually in are in communities when there is a like poor class, right? You said a lot of poor people who will be using the word in a lot of situations because they grew up with it. But I don't really necessarily think that's an excuse to use it, though, because at the end of the day, we understand that a lot of things that may happen in the poor communities are not things that we want to kind of relay to just general society. Whether you think that's wrong or not, it's up to you. But we understand there are certain things that we want people to get out of the poor community. We want people to be better than the poor community. We want better resources for the poor community. Inherently, we want a lot of things that are going on in the poor community right now to not go on in the poor community. So just because you're doing something in the poor community doesn't necessarily really excuse you to keep on doing what you were just doing. So in that situation, I can't really buy that because that would kind of open another floodgate, which I'm not willing to accept. And another thing that you're referring to in terms of when it comes down to the people acting in terms of the social cues based off if someone says the word, I don't necessarily think. I think it's partly, I'm not going to be disingenuous. I think it's partly due to certain social cues because they want to look a certain way, being as a black person or whatever race or whatever gender or whatever it is in that specific situation. I'd hear that there's a circumstances of that. But what I think of it more than anything else, and I think this is more indicative of human beings as of right now, as we know it, is it's a respect thing. When you say certain things to certain people, that immediately is going to cause a certain level of disrespect. People are all about their pride, even though pride is a sin. And once you disrespect someone, for example, saying the N word or saying something else, of course, and a reaction is a possibility. So I think that is the biggest thing because we understand the social context of the word. We understand that if we're not in this poor community where it's normalized, if we're just in a different situation, which is most situations you're probably going to be in unless you're like in that circumstance all the time, then you using that word more than likely will be a word of disrespect in that scenario for that person, not necessarily saying it's right, but for that person will be an immediate sign of disrespect. They're obviously going to act. And that's how people are, from my understanding. So anytime you disrespect them in a certain way, and a lot of people are filled up with all the pride, no matter what side you're on, that's just what an action is a possibility because people are more emotional than logical.
Yeah, well, that's what I was referring to. So this idea that it's a sign of disrespect if somebody calls you like says nigga or essay or whatever around you, even if they're saying it in the context that same context you do, right? They're saying, "Oh, that's my friend" or "That's my nigga," right? If they're saying it like that, you understand they're not they don't mean it in a derogatory way. Do you understand that they don't mean to say that you're a nigger or that they hate you or whatever? They're saying because they're your friend and maybe they grow up around you, so they speak the same way you do, or they're around you enough that they've absorbed some of your language, like which is what happens with friend groups sometimes, right? So if you feeling like that, them feeling close enough to you to use this word is a sign of disrespect. I think that's the kind of like that's what I was talking about. So they're taught to see it as disrespect. If somebody who isn't their same skin color uses a word.
If they are close enough to you, right? Let me engage with this a little bit. If they are close enough to you that they feel comfortable adopting your language, should they also not have adopted what you are and are not okay with, right? So if it would be they are obviously not close enough to you if they feel that they're close enough to you to use a word, but they don't know you enough to know that you are not absolutely okay with them saying the word. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, and no. Right. So a lot of times this will happen in like I mean, I'm sure you've had friends, Rick. I don't need to explain this to you. So friends, they kind of fill out the boundaries. Maybe you're not aware that making a joke about somebody's mom is over the line. So you do it thinking it's fine. And like, hey, don't talk about my mom, right? But there's like a line there. So friends do this, as they're developing their friendship to figure out boundaries and shit. People typically don't say to them like, hey, what things are you okay with or what are you not okay with, right? So the person saying it might just be saying it because he thinks it's okay, right? Because he thinks that's fine. And if the response is to punch him and to take it as like a sign of massive disrespect, I think that where that comes from is a social expectation that you've been conditioned into believing or having with yourself.
$5.
That if you say this, if you allow someone to say this around you and they're not black, they're not part of your group, then you're a bitch.
$5 from Testicle Johnson. White people came up with the N-word. Should they be allowed to reclaim it? Fair. I want Rose to have her shot here, and then I want to hear from Zonia.
Yeah, so sorry, I just write a bunch of stuff down. So I'm gonna go back. First of all, Doobie was saying before that it's not realistic to expect people to just stop saying the word, and I just don't understand that line of thinking.
Which word?
I'm not saying the word, but
You try to trap her, my boy.
Almost.
Yeah, so
very close.
I think we know what you're referring to. So it's not realistic to, get that word out of people's vocabularies as the argument. But it's does that mean that we shouldn't try? We've had so many civil rights groups over the years. I'm sure it didn't seem realistic 50 years ago for trans people to be accepted. Doesn't mean that they should just sit in the shadows and be like, oh, well, it's going to suck for me. never say anything, never demand anything. I know this isn't like a one-to-one comparison, but I mean, like if you go to your friends and you're like, hey, this kind of makes me uncomfortable, maybe you shouldn't say this. Like you can have like small little impacts, and that can go like a long way, because at the end of the day, it's like a microcosm. If these like, impacts and changes in the way we see society, go at a bigger level, then you're going to see change, and it's going to take time, but it's worth it. And also, when a word is normalized and desensitized like it currently is right now, I really do think that creates an environment where, like, when people do use it in a hurtful way, a lot of people are dismissive. Like, there are people who are like, big racists who will use that word, and then the people who use it in a quote unquote edgy way will be like, well, it's fine, it's not really racist. Like, I've seen so many times where that kind of behavior just gets justified and kind of like given a more positive light because that word has been so normalized within our culture.
Okay.
So I don't buy this argument. I mean, I'll keep it there.
I have a question for you, Rose, but before that, $5 from 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. People who pretend like Slurs or like Voldemort are the ones giving them so much juice. Thank you for the $5. Gang, if you want to give me money for this, feel free. Super chats, I'll read them. What is the fundamental difference? This is for Rose and Riddell, because I'm curious. What is the fundamental difference, right, between someone who is viciously insulting you with a slur versus viciously insulting you without a slur? Because we understand that people can make almost any word into a vicious, hurtful insult. I can get someone to feel bad enough to end their lives without using a single slur, right? I can target them, harass them, attack them. What makes slurs, right, magic, right? What makes them special?
So for me, when it comes down to it, when you're listening to someone insulting you, voraciously, human beings, from my understanding, will react emotionally. So it's all about emotional responses, right? So there are certain things that will be said that will hit home based on how they're said and what is said, obviously. And the easiest way to get an emotional trigger, from my understanding, is a slur. So that is the easiest way you can get an emotional trigger immediately.
Wait, not for me. Call me a slur and see how you trigger me, but call me boring and I'll get a lot more triggered, right? Like, I think that's contextual, right?
Fair. So there's a lot of like words that obviously hit an emotional trigger for different people. But I'm talking in terms of generality. I feel like slurs are the most emotionally triggering words for people generally, at the very least in America, probably other places too. So with that said, that's why I think if you use it with slurs, it would be, potentially more emotionally triggering depending on the person. Now, logically speaking, for me, if it was me in that situation, I mean, I think they are the same thing. You're insulting me either way, with a slur or without a slur. You're insulting me, but when you're getting insulted, you're not thinking logically, you're thinking emotionally.
What do you think, Rose? Can you answer that question for me?
Can you repeat the question real quick?
Sure. What makes slurs special when it comes to insults, right? Because again, we can acknowledge that we can be very vicious in our insults. What makes slurs special?
So I think that is a good question, because I mean, there is some truth to the sense that you can hurt somebody's feelings really hard just by saying things that like aren't slurs. In that sense, I think context does matter to an extent. Obviously, you can say something extremely hurtful, but because the context of the word, like you could say like, "Oh, I think you're a worthless person and you don't deserve to live," right? That would be a really hurtful thing to say to somebody. But like the words deserve, live, and worthless can be used in context. Like, "Oh, that's a worthless piece of media. Oh, this thing that I bought was worthless." So like the context of those words can be used in a way that isn't harmful, and the vast majority of the time that they're being used, they're not harmful. Certain words, when they're used, they're pretty much like always have harmful intentions. So the harmful intentions of the word are so severe. And it's kind of this thing.
When
of like,
Jay-Z asks who's in Paris, is he being harmful intentioned with his word?
Wait, who's in Paris?
Who's in Paris?
Yeah, who's in Paris?
Look, I'm not saying. I don't do that. No. A little bit.
So boring, Wick.
It's true.
Wick,
right?
need to live a little.
I think that they're, in today's context, regardless of whether it should or should not be these words just have too much power for me to be able to say them. I think they're
You
so
give it
hurtful.
power by behaving like it's a fucking
I understand,
Voldemort,
but
okay?
we
Like,
gotta
so
treat
stop giving it
reality
power.
how it is rather than how we'd like it to be. But I want to hear Rose's take on this, and then I want to hear
I'll be right
Zonia.
back.
And
On
then
what
plus, I want to jump in afterward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We got you next.
What specifically?
Okay, moving on to Zonia. Zonia, go ahead.
All right. So I guess let's say what am I going to push back on first? Okay. So when we talk about the use of word in terms of like the harm that it can do, that gets very, very messy. And it kind of gets all over the place because you have a lot of people who like there are plenty of black people, particularly older black people like boomers and older, who don't like the use of the word nigga. They don't like that being used and they think it's a problem. And but then you've got a whole bunch of younger people who are black who don't see it as like it's part of their common vernacular and how it is that they engage with each other and such. So already you've got disagreement across large swaths of people about whether or not that word has harm, right? And so if you're going to talk about harm, you really kind of need, like, I could see somebody saying it that like the word nigger only really has harmful implications because you can't, there's no utility to that word other than like describing someone else using it. So in the case of like TYT, Anna Kasparian and Jenk reporting on people using the word nigger, and they would quote the phrase that was said, I think that's like a non-harmful way in which they can use it, and that's about the only way that you can use that in a non-harmful way, because really the only utility of the word is to be disparaging toward black people.
What?
So like that you could more narrow down and say there's harm, but there's so many other words that are just like have cultural relevance and have ambiguity in whether or not they have harm. And when you talk about the use of them blurring the lines of like who's trying to be harmful, well, right now we are aggressively against people being racist. And so what do racists do? Well, they just put on all the aesthetics of not being racist, but then they still go about their day doing things and actions based on racial bias, right? They'll spit in your food when they're serving you food. Nobody knows that they're racist because they don't go and call you a nigger out of nowhere, right? But they'll spit in your fucking food. So that's not a good argument either. It just, they will hide under the guise of being non-racist by matching all the aesthetics that we expect non-racists to have, but then they'll still be fucking racist, right? So that, I don't think that's a good argument there.
Two things. Before you go on, two things real
Okay.
quick. One,
I'm going to cover the other 2 points that I had too.
I'm gonna let you go right after this, but I want to get it before I forget. I remember having the host of Heterodorks, who is a transgender woman.
Heterodox takes.
It wasn't Jenny Matrix. It was it's a popular podcast. But she came on, and she has a call sign that she does before every show, right? She uses the T slur every time, right? But I had to tell her that you can't use this word on Twitch, right? You can't use that word on Twitch because Twitch will moderate you based on that. It'll moderate me for letting you use that word, even though you are doing it self-referentially, even though you're doing it not as an insult. It's just a word that you grew up being referred to as, so you refer to yourself as it. And I felt weird having to tell them, hey, you can't use this word right now. You cannot. It felt odd to me. So I want to throw that into the mix. I want to throw the moderation into the mix of how we moderate each other and how we moderate things. I want to get that in there, if that makes sense. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. But Zonia, continue with your other 2 points. I wanted to get that out.
Yeah. Okay, so one question I'd like to pose to Rose is like, because of the fact that, well, if we talk about like how it is that we can get people to not use the word, like overall, I don't use the word casually, right? I'm using it in this case because I'm describing things, but I don't use slurs generally casually. On rare occasion, I'll use them. And so I would agree that it'd be great if people didn't lean on slurs and other forms of coarse language and instead had a broader and more colorful vocabulary that they could access and use. And I think that would be a good thing. And that's something that I think we can encourage. But how do you discourage the use of slurs other than doing the crazy shit that woke schools are doing on Twitter these days and cancel culture people are doing that doesn't really seem to be actually addressing the issue and really seems to be weaponized against people who aren't even using the words of bad intent. For example, 𝕶 𝕬𝖎𝖙 and 𝕶 with the clip chimp video that you shared. So I don't answer it just yet though, because there's one thing I want to say here real quick to follow up on, but just remember that one. And then for Riddell, part of a problem with what I have with what you said is that you say that people are just going to, that it's in the context of music. Well, then it's strictly in the context of music, and so you should still know that there's no excuse for you using it outside of like singing along to a song. But I disagree with that because I notice I get influenced by the music that I listen to, the culture of the people who come into my chat, the games that I play, everything kind of influences me. And people will say that I talk like a Zoomer sometimes, yet I'm 45 years old, right? Because I've picked up some Zoomer language and such just from all the exposure from playing games and such and multiplayer games and from the people who come into my chat and the music that I listen to. It all kind of rubs off on you, and little by little you end up saying these things. And you could say, yeah, but the N-word has like specific context that everybody knows and you know it's wrong to use. Well, I actually disagree with that being a gating factor, because if I listen to a lot of hip hop, I can tell you, because I've had this experience before, where phrases kind of come up in my head sometimes as like expressions or something, and I'll think about them and they'll come up like very naturally because I've been listening to a lot of hip hop recently that uses nigga in it. And so I'll be sitting there like it'll literally just come up in my brain and I'm ready to like say it in a phrase as an expression towards somebody, a friendly expression. And then I kind of catch myself. But I'm also 45 years old and have a lot more history of watching this evolve over time. But you have Zoomers growing up with this stuff, hearing it in their music day one. We didn't get to hear it in our music until like really gangster rap came around in the late 80s and the early 90s. And so that was the introduction for us. But I was already a preteen at that point, and it was only being gradually introduced to my vocabulary over time until I lived in a predominantly Black community when I was older. But yeah, it will absolutely influence you if you're growing up with that as a little kid, hearing that in all of your music. So I think it's a very understandable reason for someone's vocabulary being amended with that language.
Hey, so first I want Rose to answer the question that you asked. Do you think that referential slurs are wrong? So 𝕶 𝕬𝖎𝖙 using the N-word hard R to refer to something that other people have said, other people have done, other people have, not calling anyone that, but right, just reading it out. Do you think that that is wrong?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to acknowledge that things are like on a different level. Like, we can say that this isn't as bad as like X circumstance and stuff. I don't think it's right. And I think you don't have to say it. Like, and I think it's better that if you don't say it, and, saying it anyway just kind of shows like, I don't know. But I wanted to get to another thing that Zonia
Wait,
said.
no,
if this is okay.
don't dodge that point. Like you said, like just saying it anyway. So if you're reading something that someone else has said and you use it hard R, it says something, you said, I don't know, and you kind of dodge. I want to know what you think it says about the person.
If somebody says it anyway, it just shows that, I mean, it's hard to explain. To me, it's this sense of like cultural disconnect, kind of like unawareness. That's really what it is. It's not like malicious, so to say, but it's a sense of like, oh, you're saying this anyway, knowing full well how people are going to react or feel to hearing that word being said. That's really what I guess I'm trying to get at. But Zonia said something else that I wanted to respond to earlier. Is that okay? Did I answer that well enough, or?
That's fine for me. We'll dig into it later, but go on.
Okay, sorry. So I just want to make it clear, like, I don't think that people should like be fired from their jobs or have their lives ruined over saying like words and stuff. I don't think that that's helpful at all, and I don't think that that culture really benefits anybody. To me, like what bothers me isn't like when it's like someone said it once, like 2, 5, 10 years ago, or but then has gone on to be like, actually, that wasn't okay, and I don't say that word anymore. I don't think it's useful to like dig stuff up from people's past and then hold them accountable like they still hold those beliefs. I don't see the point in that. The problem is when people use it and they're like, yeah, it's fine to use it. I don't care. I'll say it. I've said it before and I'll continue to say it. To me, that is really where the issue lies. And that's like what people should be focusing on. And also, like, the T slur was mentioned. As a trans woman, like, I have a problem with other trans people using the T slur. Like, I'm not going to go up to somebody and be like, tell them what they can and can't say, if they're trans themselves. But I'm not going to lie. Like, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, it brings me back to like a time like 20 years ago when nobody knew what being trans was. There was all this ignorance. It just brings back a lot of like really icky feelings to my mind. And I'm not a fan of it being used. I feel like we've moved past it in society and stuff. I feel like I've gone on long enough.
Why isn't that just like an
Well-
internal thing that you need to deal with?
Well, I was also going to say so tranny is our own word. We created that. It was the LGBT community that used that word originally, but it kind of soured and became more of a slur in the early days of 4chan, where it was like heavily utilized against us. But it was our word. So I would argue we surrendered the word to our haters, which gave it all the power when they didn't have any in the first place because it was our word. But I'll go ahead and answer
Well,
that,
that's
but then I
like-
want to cut in with something else.
Sorry.
Raise his hand,
Well,
frog.
yeah, frog hand. But I want 𝕻𝖎, because 𝕻𝖎 was also asked a question. And I want
Yeah, I was, and then I'll let Doobie respond.
yeah.
So for me, based on what you said regarding music, one, I wouldn't say that the N word is inherently different just because of the N word. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't bring that up. I would say there are probably words in the whole catalog of music that there are probably words that people generally probably shouldn't say, depending on what the word
Oh,
is.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm also curious and to hear your answer. Just to make this topical, do you think 𝕶 𝕬𝖎 was wrong to read out the N-word hard R in reference to things? Do you think that it's wrong for people to use that word even as a reference? Do you think that they shouldn't do that as well? So if they're reading Huck Finn,
Well-
for example, should they just not say that word?
So I'll address that real quick
Yeah,
too.
please.
Because it goes in hand with another point I was gonna make actually. So when it comes down to the music part, that one's a little bit shaky, obviously, because of the popularization of it in culture. But in terms of just general compulsion to say the word based on accidental usage, I mean, I'm willing to grant accidental usage because people slip up sometimes. But to say that, oh, I heard it in music, so I'm going to use it every single day of my life, that's actual nonsense. I'm not willing to give you that. That at that point, you have no control of the things you say, and I'm not going to accept that. So I think I'm not willing to grant that point. But in terms of the aspect of using the word in a informative or potentially contextual situation, in my personal opinion, I just don't understand the value of using the word. Like in the situation, you could have easily got your point across by saying the N word with the hard R. And then everybody would understand what you're talking about. I'm not saying Anna should be condemned. I don't actually know like what people did to her or anything. I'm not saying she should be condemned necessarily. I just don't see the value of using the word in that situation when you cannot use the word, get your point across equally.
Do you
as
think it
well.
has the
And-
same impact when someone says N-word hard R versus someone just dropping it? Do you
Well,
think
the
there's a
impact
difference
here-
in impact?
Yeah, there is a difference in
So
impact.
that would be the utility, right? If you want people, and I think there is utility, to argue this side for a moment. I think
Fair
there
enough.
is utility in just, and this is why I'm allowing it for this panel and this panel alone, is because there is utility in people actually hearing the word, just to hear the impact of it, just to have it sit there, right? To have it out there. There is utility. It serves a purpose. It's for the purpose of conversation that we're doing it today. That we are saying, here it is in all its horrific glory. This is it's a real thing,
Well,
right?
And also, like, think about how much more difficult it would have been for me to describe the nuanced difference between saying nigga and then somebody saying nigga to sneak in the hard R in the way I was describing, like, example scenarios. For me to constantly switch back and forth between soft A, hard R, soft A, hard R, soft A, hard R, makes it more convoluted and difficult to understand. Right. So, and in addition to what I would also push back on, if everybody already knows what you mean by saying hard R, then what the heck is the difference if they say nigger or say hard R? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, other than just the word itself has this taboo nature to it. Everybody knows what you're saying, regardless of which one you use. And you're literally just quoting somebody else or using it referentially. You're not trying to attack the person. So, you know.
Right. So my response to that is that one, I think value is important in a lot of situations. And I do think context is important in a lot of situations. If the N-word didn't already have a contextual understanding in terms of phrasing that you can say the same thing without saying that thing, then I would have granted you. But everybody knows, from my understanding at the very least, that when people say the N-word, everybody knows what you're talking about. And when people say the N-word with the hard R, everybody knows what you're talking about. I don't really buy the aspect of people need to hear the word to understand certain contextual clues. I mean, potentially you're right. I don't buy it. I don't believe it personally. I don't think you do. It can make things more convoluted because obviously you're saying more words, but then you just honestly need to speak better, in my opinion. Make things very clear based on what you're saying. As for the other portion in terms of when you're the impact portion, which Wick said brought up. So when I said it does add impact, I think the impact it brings out is negative impact, though. I don't think it brings in positive impact. I think that's Anna and whatever, because I don't really know exactly what the context of the situation, but Anna saying what she said and bringing light to a certain scenario got overshadowed by her just saying the word. So if her whole spiel of that whole thing was our intention, like getting more attention, getting more clout, then sure. If you care about clout that much, then okay, fine, I'll grant you. I'm not one to say like clout is a good enough reason to say certain things. I don't buy that personally. But, everybody's different, I guess. But in terms of the information, in terms of the situation that you're talking about, you can have easily framed it very simply, got the same point across, and probably didn't have to deal with any of that negative press. So inherently, I think value is very important when it comes down to the usage of these words. And I just don't think the value of using the word necessitates all the backlash you're going to get, not only from the people who want to cancel you from the left, because they do, but also from the other people who are potentially harmed by the word, who gets emotionally triggered. Saying that any of what people are backlashing about is right is not what I'm doing, but we all understand that it will happen every single time you do it.
Then,
so right now,
yeah, then let me ask though.
ahead.
Right? And then I'll let you finish, and then
Go
I
for
know
it.
Doobie wanted to get in here. So this order we're gonna go into. But
Also, I still haven't heard back from Rose on my question about how do you enforce it without doing the whole woke school.
we'll get to the enforcement. We'll get to the enforcement portion because I'm curious to everyone's about enforcement or lack of their enforcement. But to your statement there about backlash, I don't know if I buy that. If I believe something, if I think a stance or a topic is worth talking about, should the fact that people will be mad at me for talking about it, should that impact whether I talk about it? I don't know if it should, right? I think that it would be cowardly, frankly, of me to simply not talk about an issue because, well, let's use a less charged issue, men's issues. Let's talk about male loneliness. You get pushback for that. Me simply having a panel about male loneliness, which I'm going to next week, gang, free advertisement, is going to get me shit on, right? I know that it's going to be responded to negatively by portions of the internet, which do watch me and which do sometimes donate to me. I have put myself at risk by talking about that on stream. To a small extent, sure, but the risk is still there. So again, backlash to me it's not an argument Does that make sense?
Oh no, that makes perfect sense because I'm the same way. I have very unique opinions, and because I ride
So
the
what makes
middle,
the N-word specifically different?
and this is where I'm going to reinforce a point that I made earlier: value. There's two aspects to kind of look at in terms of this. One is the backlash in terms of overshadowing the point that is being made. When you make a point about men's issues, what people are going to be upset about is the claim that you're making based on whatever you're talking about. In this situation, and I may be wrong because again, I don't know the anti-conspiracy stuff that well. In this situation, people are not upset about the claim; they're upset about the word. They're completely misconstruing the point of what is being said. The value of using the word in that specific scenario is not strong enough to use the word.
The honest answer here, though, is they're mad at Anna Kasparian, so they're finding reasons to paint her out as things they don't like because they've already
Which is
don't
fair.
like.
I do see a lot of like Vosh and Anna thing on Twitter. I've been seeing that on the timeline. But that's a big point for me in terms of the value of usage in terms of the word. Because at the end of the day, the word is so ambiguous. The word is so emotionally charged. It's so morally, condemnable for some and morally okay for others. And inherently, we also have a way to kind of talk about the term without using the term. So the value of using the word is just not strong enough. And when it comes down to having a conversation about a topic and getting backlash, get backlash, but get backlash about what you're talking about, so people will talk about what you're talking about, not talk about some random thing that has nothing to do with what you're talking about.
Doobie wanted in here. Go ahead.
So I have a couple things. So I think that Rodell, I think I agree with you. And that, if you're intending to get the word out about something, an issue, like a news story, it's probably not a good idea to use the actual like slur, whatever it is in the news story, right? Even if you're referring to something that someone said, not because like I think it's wrong to say it, but because you're going to distract from the actual. Well, it's not even the backlash. I think you'll just distract from the story itself, right? Because there's where did Rose go? That's sad.
She's on her phone, so maybe it was an issue with the phone.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully she'll get back up.
Yeah, because I had a question for her.
Her phone died. Her phone died. She'll be back.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, wonderful. Well, so yeah, I agree with you, but I think they're kind of pulling this back to what I said earlier. I think the way to fix that is a cultural change in the direction of these things not being such a big deal, right? And removing the power from these words. I'm not saying that people should start putting slurs in all the news stories. I think that, long term, I think we need to start stripping the power from these words. I think the way that you do that is you normalize the use of them, right? In context, not a derogatory way. I think that's the way to do it.
Or just stop reacting to them negatively.
Exactly.
Right?
So actually, I saw this is actually semi-related. I was watching like a clip someone sent me yesterday of a guy on like Jeopardy or something, or like Wheel of Fortune, spelling out the N-word. Like it was N-I-G-E-R, right? Like he just went like in order like that. And apparently the host didn't notice what he was doing. Right? But I thought it was pretty funny. But the clip that was sent to me was a guy who was black reacting to it. And he, like, the way that he reacted was like he started talking about, I'm going to beat the shit out of you if you say it, yada, yada. Right? Like, I think that kind of attitude is something that I think is like conditioned into people within that community and other communities. That, hey, if there are people outside of your racial group that use this language, even if they grew up in the same culture, even if they like whatever, right? Or even if they're using it in a derogatory way intentionally to piss you off, if the impulse is violence and that's enabled and that's normalized, I think that's the actual thing that we should focus on fixing. So I think what that does is it creates a cycle where people know that it pisses you off, so they're going to say it more, right? So the people who are actually trying to like be racist or whatever, they know this thing has power over you, so they bring it up more often.
Yeah. So oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of wanted. I don't know, maybe because Rose isn't going to be here for a bit, I guess. But maybe.
Yeah, my second question was for Rose.
Yeah, Rose is back.
But I prefer Rose to have her camera on, so I can see her beautiful face when I ask a question.
Camera, sorry.
It's okay.
Doobie, ask yours, and I'll follow up with like expanding on my follow up to the earlier back.
Okay, while you guys go, I'll be right back. By the way, just have to bio break.
Don't say it. Fuck you.
Bio break. I said it.
Disgusting.
Wait. You were.
Oh God.
You're You'll drop the hard RM bomb.
That's
but
my
me saying
slur. Okay, that's my
bio-right
slur right
is-
there. That's my
Right.
okay. You
Okay.
making me think of you taking a shit or taking a piss bothers the fuck out of me. Okay, fuck you, Wick.
Shake my head.
So,
Alright.
Rose, do you think you'll be able to have your camera on at any point in the next like 10 minutes or so, or like what's the situation?
My phone is at 3%. I'm just gonna let it
Oh, okay.
charge. If it gets to like 10 or 20, I'll put it back up.
Okay,
But
yeah,
yeah, I can't extend the charger to where I film to. So, I mean, I could have the camera on like this. I could like do that if it makes you feel better, but I have to hold
it does make me feel better actually. If you
It
wouldn't mind
does?
doing that, yes.
Amen.
Okay.
So, because Rose, I thought what you said earlier was really interesting, right? You said
Hold on, let me
that
pause on
Sure,
because
go
I
for it.
don't want this to be. Sorry, hold on one second.
I appreciate you doing this. Like I know you don't need to have the camera on. I appreciate you going through the effort.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
So-
what do you want to say?
So you were saying earlier that like the when someone says tranny, right, it makes you think of a time like a decade ago when people were using it in a really negative connotation toward you. It makes you feel bad, etc.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, because we know that there are other words that people could say, right, that make people feel bad, right? So this is why you can't say like murdered or raped or sexually assaulted or child porn on YouTube anymore, right? Like, so people tend to censor it out of videos. They'll say like grape or something stupid like that. And I'm wondering, like, if you,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if like you agree with that because, I mean, I've known of you for a while, right?
Mhm.
And you pretty publicly were like talking about how if a man raped you, you would take it as a compliment, right? On Twitter.
Oh, this isn't
you went-
relevant to the debate, but whatever.
It is though. Hold on, because that word saying somebody minimize the effects of rape, glorify rape in some ways. You said that you would take it as a compliment because he loves you so much he can't even help himself if somebody raped you. No, lots of women have been raped. That saying
Riddell having
shit
a
like
stronger reaction to this and the
saying shit like
slurs.
that.
Okay, carry on.
Saying shit like that could be extremely emotionally like damaging to them, right? Somebody minimizing
Okay.
that on a platform. Then you went into like Hunter Avalon's, and you were saying that if you were raped, you would just be nice because it'd be immoral to fight back. Like shit like that can really harm people, right? So I'm wondering like why you don't apply the same, or you don't seem to apply the same standard to
Yeah.
that you do to tranny or nigger or whatever.
So, I think it's somewhat of an interesting point, and I understand where you're coming from. To me, this is much more of like kind of like a trigger warning thing. Like, I think it's silly, like, if you're going to talk about essay in a video, like, to have like a trigger warning where it's like, oh, well, you see what the title of the video is, you know what you're clicking on. So it's like kind of silly because it's like, if you're triggered by it, then just don't click on the video. Like, stuff like that. It's like, I acknowledge that when I say that stuff, it does hurt people. But to me, the way I'm thinking is like, I'm just kind of talking about like my own experiences with like the stuff that I've personally dealt with. Like when I'm talking about those things, like I don't think the word rape is like a bad word. Like, you talk about
You don't
like
think
it's
people
a
could have a
thing.
really negative emotional reaction to
No,
you
people
saying
absolutely
glorifying or diminishing the damage of rape?
They absolutely can, but I don't think like the word rape like it I mean, I guess it could trigger some emotions in people, but I don't think it's like the same. It's more like talking about like an action that like happens.
Wait, oh, come on. Like,
It's not like
so why do you think there needs to be a
it's
trigger
not
warning
like
if it's not like the word itself is like damaging to people? Why do you think people say grape instead
it's
of rape on
not
YouTube?
it's not like an insult towards another person. And like 99% of the
Of
time when
course, not
people
an
use
insult
the
toward another
word,
person.
most people when they use the word rape, they're not saying it in a pro-rape context. Like
But you
everyone is
were.
like, yeah, but people don't say, oh my God, I'm not, but this is like completely not the debate topic we're supposed to be
Well,
having.
you just
Well, he's
it
making
is
a
But I'm
though.
point.
not,
He's-
And
I'm
so
not
this
being
is
he's
this is a
using a
word
parallel.
that massively impacts people negatively, emotionally. You seem to have a problem with that earlier with tranny and other words. Why not this one?
It's not a slur. It's an action. It's a criminal action. Like talking the word murder is not a
Well,
slur. It's a thing that happens.
So it's not the
But your
emotional damage
argument
itself
is
that is a
about-
problem. It's
Your argument
the
is on the basis of offense, and that applies to more than just slurs.
Yeah, but somebody being traumatized, you're not like traumatized by hearing the word murder.
you can
You're
absolutely be
trauma-
triggered into like reliving
You
a rape
absolutely-
through
you
hearing
absolutely
rape or seeing
can.
somebody glorify rape.
But that doesn't mean like you shouldn't be able to say the word murder. It's just saying, hey, if I'm going to talk about these topics, maybe maybe that's like if certain people are like not
Okay, but you didn't put a
If
trigger
you
warning
know
on your
it's
Twitter
like,
when you did it, right? Like you didn't have a trigger warning there.
no, I don't believe in trigger warnings.
You just said earlier
I
that you would have a trigger warning on like a YouTube video.
no. I said that I find it silly because it's like the thumbnail and the title of the video should be enough to convey what it's about. And if you're going to be triggered by it, you're going to know based on the title and the thumbnail, that you shouldn't engage. Like if you know what I'm saying? Because it's hard because it's weird because someone says like trigger warning rape, right? And you're using the word rape when you say
Or they
trigger warning.
say,
And
they'll say
yeah,
trigger warning. Okay.
trigger
They'll
warning
say
essay. So
trigger warning for survivors of sexual assault and stuff like
right,
that.
right.
Is what we
But
usually say.
what I'm saying is like bringing that up, you're still that person is still being exposed to that person now still has to think about it because it showed up on their timeline. To me, I don't see how that makes any difference versus if anything, it also adds the sense of mystery or
So you don't think there's
intrigue.
any difference between saying like N-word and nigger? Like you don't think there's any difference there at all? Because when you say N-word, people are going to think of the hard R. They're going to think of nigger.
No,
Right? So
because just the difference is the simple utterance of the word is the issue. The issue
Why?
with
Can you
rape and
just
murder
just
are
real quick
actions
stop
that happen, not the
stop
word being said.
everyone stop. Rose, can for the purpose of the discussion, I want to hone in on this. Can you elaborate what that problem is with the utterance of the word? Can you elaborate
The
on that?
problem with the utterance of the word?
Yes, please.
Well, there are actual like feelings. So like when somebody says those words, historically there is these feelings of like hatred that are expressed through the usage of the word. People in the past and people to the present to this day still do that, and people I think it's very understandable for somebody to, anytime anybody uses that word to feel like a certain type of way. So when you're referring to it, as like, the word, the N word, instead of saying the actual word itself, you're saying like, hey, I care enough about you to know that I'm not going to say it because I know this word inflicts feelings in people. I know this word has a history, and simply the utterance of the word is like damaging of itself and has been used in a hateful way, where that's not the case.
Do you
with
feel the
these
same
other
thing with
words.
words like retard or idiot?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the R slur. I don't use that.
the R.
I'm
Sorry.
vocally against that, and I don't think it should be normalized.
I mean,
They're the same
I knew
thing.
somebody who would have like a legitimate like I thought he was joking initially, but he'd have a full on breakdown if you called him annoying, right? Because he had some kind of trauma from when he was a kid, people calling him annoying and bullying him, whatever the fuck. So if you ever called him annoying, he would freak the fuck out, right? Because he just had like some trauma response to hearing that word said to him.
I understand.
So I
understand
avoided saying
that.
that word to him, right? So not because I think there's anything wrong with the word annoying. I call lots of things annoying, but he had a massive emotional reaction. It hurt him because I don't want to hurt him. I didn't say it, right, to him specifically. So I'm wondering,
Yeah.
but like, so you understand that there are lots of women who have been raped, right? Who have a terrible reaction to hearing that word or seeing people glorify rape, but you did it. Right, so I don't understand why you see that as any different from somebody saying like nigger or tranny or spick or kike or whatever the fuck on any of these platforms. Like, yeah, people are gonna have a negative emotional reaction. Why does it matter when you say kike and not when you're like glorifying rape?
Oh my God, this is such a weird conversation. But when you say like the word like rape or something, there's not an indication that the utterance of the word is like, it's not like me saying that word is making it seem like I have these bigoted feelings towards somebody else. It's not like me saying the word means that I think certain things about certain people and that using it's
Yeah, but you
hard
were
to, it's
glorifying it.
hard.
You were saying that you take rape as a compliment.
I'm not
Right. So
pro rape.
I've never been raped before, fortunately. But if I were somebody who had been raped, I can imagine, because I'm a very emotionally empathetic person, right? I can imagine feeling some type of
You're
way about
emotionally empathetic, but then you say all these slurs without caring.
yeah, of course I do. So somebody seeing me glorify rape, right? Or seeing somebody glorify rape, which is what you were doing because you have a rape fetish, and then feeling terrible about it. This person is glorifying the terrible thing that happened to me, downplaying how serious it is, how much damage it did to me. Like that's fucking awful. Like why would you?
Doobie, I do not. The thing is, with me personally, I do not want to make other people feel bad. I just talk about my own personal experiences
That's
and
fair.
how they make me feel because of what I've been through. I want to put that out in the world. If somebody said to me, like, hey, this makes me feel uncomfortable, can we not talk about this? Yeah, but the problem here is not every conversation I go to, somebody finds a new creative way to make this a topic about something completely separate into suddenly, hey, Rose, let's talk about this. And it's every single time. So it's like at some point you have to be like, okay, how much fault are you guys for like making me have to talk about this on a completely unrelated issue? Like this
Well, I
isn't
don't have the
race
standard that you
debate.
do, right? So I wouldn't say that, hey, I'm not going to say this word because out there in the world somewhere there's somebody that might be offended by it. You seem to have that standard, right? You won't say nigga, you won't say nigger, because somewhere out there in the void there's a black person who's going to feel bad about it, right? But it seems like what I'm saying is it doesn't seem like you apply that standard to other words that also damage people. So it seems like you have a double standard, or you're like hypocritical there.
Well, what happens is that you have these friend groups and they say these words in their friend groups, and everybody in the friend group is cool with it. Everyone in the friend group doesn't see an issue. They think that it's fine. It's all harmless humor. But the problem is that influences like these people's behavior. It influences the way that they view these issues, right? It doesn't exist in a vacuum. That person's going to go out into the world and their influence is going to change. You know, sometimes that word may slip out because it's part of their vocabulary now because they've normalized it so much and it will hurt somebody. There are all these instances where like just because nobody in that room was personally hurt by it, just the propagation and the spreading of these terms does cause harm on a, you know, greater level.
Pause for a minute, because I'm curious what Riddell thinks about that argument.
Yes,
No, it's fine. You have that same stance, right? That if a friend group is okay with using a slur, even a light slur like I'm not gonna say the slurs, right? But a friend group normalizes, and they're all okay with. They're even all members of the group that the slur is referring to, right? They're okay with saying it. Do you think it influences them? And how so? How do you think it influences? If you do.
Influences them as in the friend group or other people?
Friend group, specifically, the people using it.
Yeah, it definitely influences them to an extent, right? So I'll give you an example, and I'll give
Please,
you a personal
please.
example, right? So I have friends, obviously, right? I have friends. We play Xbox, and I don't want to hear anything about PlayStation. We play Xbox. So we go on Xbox and we play Call of Duty. All right. So we play Call of Duty sometimes, and we play Search and Destroy. We're in public lobbies, and there's a word that is used at from time to time. Not necessarily the N word, right? Not even though that's a popular word to use in COD lobbies, but sometimes my friends slip up and say the F word, right? Um,
Hey,
they say
fuck.
that
Fag or faggot.
they say that
Whoa.
or the R word. You know what I'm saying? And
In COD lobbies and COD channels and stuff, like it's fag is a big one, or faggot is a big one.
That's
For
very
sure.
entertaining, yeah.
It's for sure. So in those situations, you know, the continuous use of the word is going to normalize them saying the word. And what will happen in turn is them potentially slipping up and saying a word in a scenario where it's way more damaging to their potential reputation. Because I have a few friends that also are in the military. If they accidentally say that word to the wrong person, now the military is also very shaky, especially if you're in the Marine Corps, but one's in the Air Force, so they're a little bit more they're a little different in terms of how they handle things, right? So they have to
They're
be
more
very careful.
progressive overall too.
Yeah, so they have to be very careful in terms of the terminology they use, especially if they normalized it in certain settings, right? So for me, understanding the not only the harm the word has. Now, I'm not like emotionally triggered or emotionally invested in the word, but I understand the value of the word is just not needed. It has no value. It's not important. It's not needed in most scenarios. So I do tell them, hey, you need to chill out on the word. There's really no reason for you to say it. Now I can't control them. They're grown ass men, so I can't tell them what to do. But I, know the value of the word is minimal. It has no real value, and it serves no inherent purpose other than being edgy or being angry. So with that understanding, I try to make them understand that. But when you use a word enough times, and I mean, Zonia said it before, when you hear music enough times, it can occasionally slip out. It can occasionally, be brought in the forefront in different scenarios. And when that is the case, and you know the social cues and the social context of society, and you know that people are emotionally charged, the expectation that people are just going to say, "Oh, that's cool, I don't care," is unrealistic, right? So Again, this kind of coincides with my argument that the word has no value, and the only time you use the word is if you're being edgy. And if you want to take that risk, go ahead, but you're expecting something from another person that I know inherently you don't believe, because you know that people are not rational in general. So that's my take
So,
or the
like,
situation.
what you bring up here, this kind of coincides with what I want to talk about, which is sort of like the discouragement of use versus the encouragement of broader vocabulary, right? And so, Rose, I wanted to originally I asked you the question. You kind of partially answered it, but like one of the things I wanted to say was because you talked about how you don't think somebody should like lose their job or something or be like canceled. But I mean, even you have gone out of your way to really loudly broadcast and I know it sounds insulting, but grandstand by quote tweeting people and putting it out there. You posted the clip chimp stuff of Anna and said that she was a bad person because of those phrases, and you were really loudly grandstanding about the group chat that Brianna Wu was in because of a similar group chat that you had previously been in that would say like the word nigger and stuff like that occasionally. So why like it seems like you sort of have maybe an inconsistent position there. Do you think that that aligns with your statement that people shouldn't be canceled or shouldn't be
Well,
negatively impacted in such a way by, calling them out for this?
well, generally, I'm against cancel culture. Like, I don't think people should lose their jobs, but there's a difference between cancel culture and just saying, like,
Well,
hey,
what
this
should
is a
happen?
thing. Let's talk.
What should
I
happen?
think
Because
that people,
Rose Millay, you put out tweets, right? And I saw these. You put out tweets calling out different groups for using slurs, right? Amongst the groups. What do you think and what do you want happen to the people you called out?
I want them to learn and to not use those anymore. I want people to grow from that. I don't think that it helps people to cancel them. I just think that there's a difference between like that, but at the same time, what should we do? Not talk about it? I think we should say, "Hey, I think this is a problem. You should stop doing this." But that doesn't on its own mean that I want this person's life ruined. It doesn't mean that I want this person to be fired from their job. It just means like, "Hey, I took, I'm personally bothered. I think other people are bothered by the stuff that this person is saying. Please do not do this in the future. Be better." Like in Anna's case, the reason I'm against her is because of comments she's made about trans stuff recently. And we that's not relevant
Can
to
you
this
give us an
conversation.
example? Just so we can engage with it.
Yeah, so this all started with like the birthing person thing, but then some other stuff was brought up later that I remember reading. I don't have the receipts on me right
So the
now.
birthing person stuff for my audience is Anna
That was where
Kasparian.
it
Just let me
started.
explain to my audience really quick what that is if they're not familiar. So Anna Kasparian came out with a tweet saying, hey, she gets offended when she's called a birthing person. She considered it a slur. But you were mad that she wasn't willing to let you call her that, Rose?
Wait, what? Who wasn't willing to call me
Anna
what?
Kasparian. He considered, in a very real way, birthing person to be kind of a slur when it came to talking about her.
Well, that birthing person isn't a slur, though.
Why not?
I mean, first of all, I think like the term is cringy, and I'm not like I don't think people should use it. But at the same time, it's not like
Why isn't it
just
slur?
to act like a word that's inclusive towards trans people is like offensive to cisgender people is a joke.
Wait, but it is. You're diminishing them, these females, to their like reproductive organ, and it's reasonable for them to be
No,
offended by that.
I'm sorry. This idea that like trans inclusive language is like misogynistic. It's just it's not even like worth like taking that argument seriously because it's
Isn't
just
this like
so
wouldn't
I'm
this be
gonna
like
link you
me
something
saying
in
like
DMs? Well, I'll put it in the group chat.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, $20 for fondue to say some people will say that only black people can use the N-word. Oftentimes it is used as a synonym for brother or friend by them. Isn't disallowing other races to say the phrase the same as saying black people can't be friends?
No,
Not sure that is.
That's hyperbolic take.
I don't agree with that.
Wick, I just DM'd you something. Like, and I'll let Rose continue, but like, Rose, I think this is a really poignant point here because you literally responded in a thread I was in saying Anna
Yeah.
is a bad person, actually, with the clip chimped instances of her doing her job as a reporter, as an anchor, reading off what other people had said when reporting on the news. And so I think that very much goes against what your stated position is on whether or not, like, how it is that we should judge people by this and whether or not they should be condemned, right? You're saying they shouldn't be condemned, but here is an example, literally from yesterday, of you using clips of her to condemn her and say that she's a bad person.
Okay, so first of all, my main issue with her has always been the trans stuff, and this is stuff that she's like saying recently. And to
Yeah,
me,
but you
the
literally
rhetoric is
supported it with these
escalating.
clip instances of her saying the word nigger.
She's interacting and talking and defending people who have gone on record saying I'm trans. I believe there was this one guy who like made an article about like trans like
This
youth
isn't
hormones
even
being
the
harmful or
point
something,
here.
and she was like defending. I'm just saying there's points where she's done that behavior, and because of that, it's like we're showing a pattern. I do think that there's truth to the fact that we don't know how old these clips are. Obviously, I saw only the video. I don't know where specifically these clips are coming from.
They're from many years. Some of them more recent.
Yeah,
some of them from over 10 years ago. It's a mixed. The most recent one was like 2020 or 2021. But
has Anna gone on and like acknowledged this? Has she like made an apology for that?
She did on the Sitch and Adams show. She talked about how originally they had talked about this and they had talked about whether or not they should be literal when quoting, be verbatim with quoting these things. And they decided as an organization that they would go forward and be literal with these things. And so it was a thing that they just did until they finally stopped doing it more in the last few years.
Well, my position is like, as a trans person, it feels like a lot of times when trans people come forward and say like, hey, this is a problem, this kind of like, I can usually see like when the seeds are planting, when someone's kind of heading towards that turf, like, pipeline. And I feel like when that happens, a lot of people just turn their backs or they don't care. And so to have like these clips where she's, doing this other stuff, it like kind of like, it feels like, okay, there's something here. It's like,
understand.
okay,
but what I don't understand, what I'm having a problem understanding, and it's a legit problem understanding. Like, again, Doobie has mentioned that his friend said, hey, you calling me annoying really bothers me. Please don't do it. He was respectful enough to say, okay, fair enough. I won't do it. And a Kasparian like you, for example, have said, hey, don't call me the T slur. It really offends me. I really don't like it. I really wish you wouldn't do it. So most people who are polite, and I think they should respect that and just not use that around you. That's reasonable, right? But when Anna Kasparian asks, hey, I really don't want you calling me a birthing person. Please don't do that. It offends me. Suddenly, we're like, well, actually, no, we're going to call you this, and you're going to fucking take it.
Because Wick, that is malicious. You don't understand, like TERFs and people and these people are malicious. They use these words that literally what it is. And first of all, I think birthing person is cringe, right? That's my personal belief. I wouldn't say it. I'm not going to call it like misogynistic or something. But the problem is that a lot of people will take trans inclusivity and then they'll weaponize it and they'll frame it as misogynistic as an order to get people maybe more on the left wing to kind of agree with them, left wing, They'll use it as like a tactic on purpose because they see the rise of people caring about these sorts of things.
Or maybe she just doesn't want to be called that.
Can I say something?
It's a valid or legitimate concern.
So my question for you, Rose, wouldn't it be better, because instead of like fighting this uphill battle and creating all these scenarios for Anna, wouldn't it be better, because you already said you think the term is cringe, just say, okay, I understand this specific scenario, and then the further conversation is a different conversation, because you're making a battle, you're creating a battle when a battle doesn't need to be fought, especially when you already admitted that you think the term is cringe.
Well, my issue with Anna is mostly other things. And like I watched like, different YouTube videos, like, an hour-long video here about like talking about stuff, about people's experiences. And there were like plenty of other points being made about how like the environment was changing from, and this is somebody who's claiming to supposedly be supportive and on our side. And obviously you're going to have higher standards for those sorts of people. So this is somebody who's supposed to like, be pro-trans and stuff, but is also displaying a lot of behavior recently that is very much anti-trans. And it's just showing like a complete 180 in behavior. There's a lot of worrying signs. warning signs. And it's not, to me, it's not just the birthing person thing. It's also the sign of, okay, this person is now aligning with the people. They're making the same arguments that the transphobes are making. This person clearly, isn't, on our side, despite claiming to be, and that's like a problem. I mean, it's a lot of stuff going into this. And again, this isn't an Anna Sarkeesian debate, but I
It's
truly
not,
think
but
that
this
what
is a
she's doing
good
is
example,
delicious.
right? Like, this is a good example of saying, hey, this term, someone's saying, hey, this term is offensive to me. I think it's on the level of a slur for me. Please don't use it. And then no one giving a shit, right?
Because that's the thing. TERFs will go all the time. Like, J.K. Rowling and stuff will be like, well, a trans woman sharing my restroom makes me feel uncomfortable as a woman.
Okay, but
and
she
reminds me
didn't
when I was
say
it's
that.
not legitimate.
She wasn't
That's used
she
to
wasn't.
justify their bigotry. That's the same when segregation. A lot of people are like, oh, it makes me uncomfortable to share a bathroom with somebody. That's what's going on with trans stuff now. Like, that's not genuine concern.
Again,
That's just
do you
bigotry
think that people should
disguised as
have
by
some say in
malicious
how they are
people.
referred to
Oh my
in polite
God. I
society?
mean, as a trans woman, yeah, and I'm not even a fan of the term, but it's the weaponizing of the term. It's the idea that the term is being used as a misogynistic rhetoric for cisgender women, and it's just so blatantly dishonest and spreads hate and just leads to this terrible environment. And it's like, you know what you're doing when you say stuff like that. Sorry, like, again, this is
We're
not
so off
what
topic.
this is.
But
I know.
Yeah, we
I
are
know.
off topic, but I just wanted to interrogate that a little because I know you're saying that there's a difference here. I'm just not seeing it. Maybe it's because I'm 80 IQ and really dumb. Maybe I'm just a dummy dumb. Maybe I'm retarded. I don't know. But I do not see the difference.
An imbecile.
Yeah, an idiot, right?
A dimwit.
Oh,
A
keep
simpleton.
going. Keep going.
Eventually, you get to a slur.
Yeah. But this is the thing where when you get to the core of it, someone is saying, this term that you're using to me, is offending me. Please don't call me this. And I think that's a fundamental different thing. That's a fundamentally a different thing than someone saying, hey, don't do this around me, right? Because that's different, right? Like,
if a person says, I'm offended by you calling me a straight man, I just want you to call me a normal person, are you going to take that shit seriously? Are you going to be like,
yeah, what I won't do is double down and say, okay, straighter age, straight guy, drag it. Yeah, I won't say any of that, right?
Because these people aren't being legitimate. The only reason they're doing this
Why
is
do you
because
think
they're
that?
purposely trying.
Why do you think that it's not like? Why do you think that they're lying to you when they say that they feel offended by you diminishing them to their biological parts? They're basically their vagina.
Oh my God. Because it's so obvious that it's coming from a place of hate. It's coming from a place.
How's it obvious?
Because I deal with this shit on like a fucking daily basis. I know these people's tactics. I know what they do. They just want to push back against
Anna's tactics? Wait, hold on. This is really important because you're using what we would call you're basically saying, well, I know what other TERFs have done, and Anna is doing things that seem similar to that, so therefore she's doing it in order to do harm or weaponizing it. But
she's literally trying to call trans women misogynistic for wanting to be inclusive, for wanting to be accepting. So they're trying to say, you want rights? Well, I think your rights are offensive to me. You want to be seen as a woman?
Wait, hold on. What rights?
Real women. Well, that's what they're saying.
Okay, you're teleporting here without. No, is this okay? There's a problem here. What rights is she saying that we don't deserve?
Oh my God. This isn't like I said before, this isn't an isolated thing. This has real world.
Hold on, just answer the question. Just answer the question.
By tweeting this, she knows exactly what she's doing. Again, this is so
I'm not pretending to read her mind. I just want to know, what has she come out and said? Trans women don't deserve to be called women. They should be called males. Is that what she's saying or something?
I don't even want to have this conversation right now.
Well, because
this is, if we want to have a separate Anna Sarkeesian debate, we can talk about that.
Okay, if you don't want to talk about it, I will. Okay, that's enough.
Conversation. I just don't think now is the time or the place.
Sure.
We've talked about this enough.
Well, we are coming out the 2-hour mark, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I do have a hard cutoff.
So. Yeah, so I wanted to People are asking if I want to open this up. I don't know if I do.
Oh, people are gonna come in here saying
You're gonna
crazy
say
stuff.
Yeah,
yeah, you're gonna get some real.
I might open it up,
uses
but
of
if I did open it up,
words.
I'd require you to be on camera. So if you want to come on and say a slur, I'm not deleting this. And if you want to do it with your whole chest, come on, turn your camera on, let us see your face, and say your shit. I guess I'll let you, but that's gonna be there for 4K. If that's what you want to be, right? But
Mind
I
if
don't
I
know.
do the closing statement first?
Yeah,
since
yeah.
I
Well,
gotta
let's get to.
hard
I'm
go?
sorry, but yeah, let's let all these people have final thoughts on slurs and what they think and why they are based or cringe. And I wanted to start the. We'll go in the reverse order which we started. I'll let 𝕍𝖎 begin, and we'll just go around.
Yeah. So, to be clear on like my position, if you're going and you're trying to disparage somebody based on their immutable traits, you're a fucking retard. You're an asshole. And if you're trying to sneak it in under the radar, like smuggle it in with certain words that you're claiming you're part of your culture or, that you have the pass for, okay, you're a fucking retard. I'm sorry, that's just some bullshit. Like if somebody's trying to sneak in the hard R by using the soft A and saying, well, it's the culture that I'm into and everything. Yeah, fuck you. I think that's bullshit. If you're going to say shit, just own it. I don't think we should care as much about these things, though. I don't like we can acknowledge, yeah, they're being an asshole, but we shouldn't invest a lot of energy in the policing of these words and the policing of the language and such. But what I think we should do, and I think Riddell agrees with me on this, is that we should encourage people to have a broader, more colorful language that they can better articulate their points with, so they don't have to go and lean on coarse language and vulgarity and such in order to try and express themselves. And I think that's a great thing. Now, I'd also like to call out that a lot of what I've been saying here today, I'm doing it for utility purposes. You're also a retard if you're trying to come up with excuses to say a bunch of slurs. So, if that's something you're trying to do, you should maybe kind of question your own motives and where they come from and why it is that you need an excuse to say slurs.
𝕍𝖎, thank you for being here. Where can people find you?
Kick.com/𝕍𝖎 right now. You can also find me on Twitch, 𝕍𝖎, on YouTube at 𝕍𝖎TV. But I've been using primarily Kick these days, so kick.com/𝕍𝖎, 𝕍𝖎.
Check her out, gang. Thank you again for being here. This topic has been interesting. I appreciate you coming. Next
Looking
up,
forward
Rose.
to all the bleeping in the final edited video.
I don't think we're gonna have an edited version of this. I'm just gonna let it sit there in the ether, and if people want to engage with it, they may. Rose, go ahead.
All right, peace out.
Okay, so first of all, I think that when a lot of people say this stuff in private, they believe that they're, not, being hurtful or racist or whatever. And I just personally don't believe it because they know fully well what these words mean. They know full well the context, and they could believe in their hardest of hearts that they have the best intentions of it. I just think that in reality, right, there's a sense of ignorance at play, and I do think it's harmful. Just because there's no intention of harm, it doesn't mean that the harm isn't there. And it's very clear and obvious when looking at the society around us and how people are hurt by these things. I just find it like a huge problem that people are saying these sorts, especially people who claim to be progressive and care about, claim to be progressive and care about these things, are propagating these words, are saying these words like they're fine, are going out of their way to state them openly and state them repeatedly, not really caring because they think it's fine in their own twisted like minds and stuff. It's just really bothersome. And I feel like I'm living in crazy world. The fact that these people are claiming to care about these issues, but then they'll just continue to say this and not respect other people's opinions or feelings or people getting hurt. I just think it's crazy to me. And I just hope that we can live in a society in the future where people are more sympathetic to how this affects people. And we realize that we can get our points across by not using slurs and that the world will be much better off for it. So that's what I want to see. Thanks for having me. You want to catch me, youtube.com/c/𝕍𝖎. I have other platforms too, obviously. Right. Bye.
Check her out, gang. Thank you again for coming, and thank you for this conversation. I'd love to talk specifically with you about the 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 stuff because I'm very curious. But for now, thank you again. Check her out, gang. Great. Riddell, please.
All right. So when it comes down to slurs, for me, my position is very clear. I don't think there's any need to use the word. I don't think there's any value in using the words. I think for the most part, I stand by it. The only people who tend to use it nowadays are just trying to be edgy. And the value of being edgy is, in my opinion, not worth it at the grand scale. I also don't agree with the idea that we can desensitize a word that has so much historical context. I don't think that makes sense because at any point somebody can go back in history in terms of the origins of the word and then find how terrible it is, and then it will resurface. Everybody just stop using it. It'll be a perpetual cycle, and that's my belief in terms of that specific point. I think when it comes down to it, something important in like stop incentivizing people to not use the word and expand their vocabulary, as Zonia said, is not only will be good for the community as a whole, but it stops the precedent of using the word in just casual settings, which is obviously the goal. So people can just use other vocabulary and not focus on it at the end of the day. So with that said, I don't think people should be condemned, though. I don't think people should lose their jobs. The word is just a word at the end of the day, but honestly, it's a word that's not needed in society at the end of the day. With that said, you can find me and my podcast, Purple Political Breakdown, a podcast to find solutions without political bias. And you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're starting to stream a little bit more every Mondays and Thursday, 8 p.m. EST, on stuff like Kick, Twitch, Rumble. I'm giving a Rumble experiment, and YouTube. So make sure to check us out there to see a lot of very interesting conversations.
Hey, thanks for being here, and thanks for being willing to argue your points very effectively. I think you did very well. And gang, I've been on his podcast before. We had a wonderful discussion with him and his co-host. You should check it out and give him a follow, give him a view, give him whatever metrics they use to get paid. So he's great. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you, buddy. Last but certainly not least, Doobie, go ahead.
So I think the diminishing of the reaction to me saying nigger or kike or faggot or spick or tranny or whatever the fuck right now, both in chat and here in the panel, right, as we've been speaking about this, I think demonstrates the point that I was making. I think that using these words removes the power from them, right? It makes them less scary for people. So I think that if you actually care about these things, the goal should be to remove the power from these things, to remove the power from words like this that can harm people, like the gay community did with queer, right? For example, like they're doing right now with faggot in some cases. I think that should be the end goal. I don't think it makes sense to treat these like Voldemort and hide from them or have an overly emotional reaction to hearing them. In terms of like the use, I think that they have as much use as like dude or bro or whatever the fuck has, right? Like I think they're as useful as any other word, right? So I don't know. I just think it's a little bit silly, to be honest. I also want to point out that I think Rose is a bit of a hat ass, but that's okay. I so appreciate you for
what did you say about me?
I said you're a hat ass, but that's okay.
What the fuck does that mean?
I look it up. I think that Google it. I think that I wanted to thank you for putting up with me questioning you on your questionable rape takes. Okay,
it's not okay what you said to me.
That's
How do you
okay.
spell that? Had, H-A-D?
Yeah, it's had.
Why?
Why
would you say that to me?
Y-U-H, the color purple, and
You're
pink.
just a fucking awful person. Oh
Okay.
my gosh.
Doobie, where can people find you?
Discord. Discord.gg/politics, the best and biggest politics server on the Discord platform. We have lots of AMAs, lots of crazy shit happening at all times. It's a great time.
Okay, I'm going to remove you all now and address my audience for a moment. So
Okay.
we're not ending the stream, gang, but I do want to talk a little bit to all of you.
Bye-bye.
So I just want to make it clear, okay, to all of you who are out there, this is the only panel I would allow that kind of language because this is a specific topic, a specific subject. So if you come onto my streams at a later date, you think it's okay to say this, you're going to be sorely disappointed. It is not. I will moderate you. I will remove you. I allowed it in this instance alone, because I think it had value to the topic, and it added, it was important for people to actually hear these words said in a conversation about these words. Does that make sense? If you have a problem with this, right, and I understand that some people might, please, by all means, let me know. Talk to me about it. I will defend my position here. I think that it is, if we are going to have a discussion on these things, a serious discussion on these things, then we have to actually discuss these things, and we have to actually say them, or at least have them said. They have to be said out there so people know what it is. And people act like, oh, well, people can hear that. Not in this kind of context, right? It's different in this kind of context, I think, than just hearing a racist say it, or hearing someone on the street say it, or hearing it in a song, or reading it in a book. I think there's a fundamental difference here. I do not shy away from it. It is something that before the panel, just so everyone was clear, it was made clear, right, that like I said, hey, we're not gonna be able to go on Twitch anymore because these words are going to be said. So that's why I think, everyone was consenting to it. Everyone knew what was going to happen, right? I made it as clear as I could. Or I didn't expect it to be as said as often as it was, right? That was surprising. I thought it was going to be referenced once or twice. It was not, but hey, it is what it is. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for the donations. Thank you for talking to me about it. I am going to continue this discussion, right? So if you want back in, if you want to talk about it more, we are going to continue on and continue talking about it. We also have what I want to direct to you, a new release, right? A YouTube video edit of my Wednesday conversation on racial awareness versus colorblindness. It's going to be a 3-part segment. There's going to be the panel itself. We're going to do a segment where Destiny comes on, and then we're going to do the aftermath of that. And you can find that on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/@WhickTV. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Consider, if you like the content, if you enjoyed these kind of open, honest discussions, throw me some super chats. Reward me for this. If you're on Kick, hit that follow button. Give some subs on Kick. I could use a payday on Kick as well. So give me a few subs on there. I get a lot of more money, a lot of bigger cut from Kick than I do from Twitch. So it helps me more when you donate to me on Kick. You can find me at kick.com/WhickTV. If you want to come and talk about slurs tonight, we are opening this up now. But I will say, for this panel, right, for this after discussion, I will be requiring you to use your camera. So if you want to say something, right, since we're not on Twitch, if you want to say something, you may, but you're going to have to say it with your whole ass chest. You're going to have to be on camera willing to say this, right? Where people can see your face. Because if you are going to say this, back it up, right? Like, say it with your chest. Anyway, jump backstage. I will give you the Discord link. I recognize we're not on Twitch, so I actually have to manually give you this. Give me a moment. Boop. Boop. Okay, there you go. But yeah, jump backstage, and I will pull you in, and we will have discussion about what you thought, etc. If you're in the vetting room, and I'm gonna just assume you still went on.
Hello.
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, if you didn't want back on, I understand, but you were still there, so I just brought you back on for the after show. So
I said a lot of naughty words. I figured people might want to yell at me, so I would give them an opportunity.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
I mean, they can't yell at a frog, bro.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, we were just in
All
there
right,
talking
again,
about...
remember my rule though, and Doobie gets the pass because he's never been on camera, right? Like this is his whole thing, right? There's other reasons he's not.
Oh,
on
so
camera?
it's okay for him to hide his identity, and he gets to say
Yeah.
all that awful shit and get away
Yeah.
with it. Oh, that's fucking bullshit.
Why is
How
that?
is that
Why is
bullshit?
Double
again?
standards.
It's different, but
That's
Because Rose wants to be able to track me down and shut down my company. That's why.
Poof and Rose, you're gonna need cameras for that.
Oh, I mean, okay. So again,
Poof. You got
Yeah,
camera before I
I'll
let
make
you
it feel better.
talk.
Okay, one second.
okay, hold on.
Shaking my head, my guy.
I'm camming up.
Yeah, please do.
Come
Yeah.
on.
I was gonna say, I personally don't have much of an issue with slur usage because I feel like in society we have inhibitors towards these undesirable actions in the first place. So if we already have these social inhibitors towards undesirable actions, I don't understand like why people are they have these hyper histrionic responses to other people.
We
using
aren't
slurs.
going to address you until you camera up. So
There we go.
okay.
My guy.
Yeah.
Took you a bit, but thanks for doing that.
Yeah. But, you know my camera's terrible right now. We talked about this, but yeah. But again, we have these hyper histrionic responses towards these slur usage. But again, why? Well, this is not moving society in the right direction.
Yeah, we shouldn't be emotional. I agree.
Not that we shouldn't be emotional. It's that
I mean, that's how all the problems arise, right? People being emotional based off these phrases that you're referring to, and after they're being emotional regarding the phrases, they act in a very negative way. Whether they try to cancel them or get physically violent, that's what happens.
yeah. Well, so my issue here is there's a way that we go about setting boundaries in society, right? Without necessarily resorting to having to cancel somebody, right? I mean, I feel like I'm not going to say I'm a free speech absolutist, but I don't feel like I don't want to say canceling shows or whatever, but I'm a liberal, so I do believe that there's some utility in voting with your dollar, right? But resorting to always wanting to see the downfall of somebody just because they use the words that you don't like, to me, is unnecessary.
I don't know
What are
you
some
mean
of
by
our
voting
thoughts?
for
Like,
your
I
dollar.
want to hear from. I'm sorry, Riddell, but I want to hear from the people who
worries.
weren't on the panel first, right? I want to get them the initial kind of reaction kind of thing. Like, again, I've never seen a show where they just dropping slurs like that. So what were some of your thoughts? I didn't expect them to just drop as many as they did. I thought we were just going to reference it once or twice and that'd be good. But I was wrong.
It's super base, bro. Super base.
All right, I'm gonna head out. Bye. But I don't say any of that stuff. But
I
anyway, bye,
understand.
guys.
Bye, Rose.
Yeah.
You're still ahead ass.
Elder 𝕬𝖎𝖙, what are your thoughts here?
I just think it's pretty insane when anybody acts like the context of a slur being used has nothing to do with like whether it's good, bad, acceptable, not acceptable. It's probably been almost a year now. I went to a concert. One of my favorite musicians is Joyner Lucas, and everybody there in Detroit sang every single word. There was a 9-year-old white girl next to me singing all the words, and nobody, not a single person batted an eye. Everybody can hear everybody standing next to each other. Nobody cared because we all knew why we were there. We were all there because we were fans of his music. If we were hateful, yeah. Absolutely. I sang every single one of them. I sing them all when I'm in my vehicle. I'm not going to censor myself when I'm in my vehicle and not like I'm not going to be sitting there like, oh wait, I have to like stop thinking about the song that I'm listening to and change it up. But everybody at the whole show sang every word and nobody cared. And we know that nobody's saying it to be racist because we're at his show. We've given him money. We want to hear his music. And this showed me too that like all these people here know that context matters. Because if everybody at this show, or if anybody at this show thought context didn't matter, they'd be losing their fucking mind every single song. They'd be flipping their shit. And so I think that saying like music's kind of a gray area. No, I think music is the clear indicator that we do consider context to matter. Because like nobody's going to, if you're racist, you're not going to buy a black artist album just so you can say the N-word. There's no way. If you are, you're on some like next level like 4D chess shit.
You're
and I don't think we need to worry about
you're
that.
peaking. Your mic's got a lot.
Oh,
lot
sorry,
of
I
peak.
leaned forward. But I mean,
You're
that's
getting really
pretty
passionate
much.
about the N-word.
I think that's pretty much it. Unless does anybody think that what I said is like crazy or obtuse?
No, I mean,
I agree.
does anybody else want to say something real quick?
I do want to say, like, I agree with everything 𝕵𝖎𝖎 said because, again, it's kind of one of those things where, like, I'm Latino, and I grew up saying every slur, especially because of the Call of Duty, right? The culture of gaming and everything, and you just hear everybody in there saying it, and it's one of those things that you adapt. But then again, when you're with your friends, when you're with like, like in middle school, high school, with your friends, you just start using like these words, even though we call them slurs and they are slurs, they can be used in a good, positive way. That especially with your buddies, right? Like you don't mean any ill intent whenever you say it to your best friend, right? So that's just my two cents because I just don't understand because like with my brothers, I always use those words, right? Because again, that's how we grew up. That's my brothers. That's the culture we grew up in, and those are the words we use. We don't hate each other, right? So context definitely matters. When you're driving home from work and you got the music playing and everything, and you're singing along with the music, right? Like context matters. So I agree with you.
Well, I was also going to say something really quickly. That I have seen a growing sentiment around like since 2015, 2016, here on YouTube and on different and on Reddit and TikTok, that people think that it's okay to hit somebody because they're using a slur. And I'm not entirely sure as to where that sentiment is coming from or where it's growing or why it's growing. But to me, it is disgusting to even entertain the idea of wanting to hit somebody in the face because they used a word that you don't like, regardless of how offensive that word is.
Yeah, violence is not okay. But in terms of what you said about the music part, it's hard for me to say that 100% of people knew all the context behind it. It's also very hard for you to say that a racist person wouldn't want to go to the concert. I mean, I get the rationale, right? I get the
I'm saying
rationale, but
they're
in
not
terms of
singing along because they're racist.
oh no, I agree to that point. It's just like the other things I just want to, for me, just to get the full picture, it's just because they are singing it and they are singing it, saying the N word in that situation, doesn't necessarily mean that they'll understand the context and not to use the word inappropriately in a different situation, right? Because a lot of this is, precedent based, right? I'm not precedent based in the terms of and Zonia brought it up, and I said this before my closing, is that once you kind of make things okay, it gives a certain level of comfortability behind the word. And that certain level of comfortability can potentially be, used or slipped up in a very bad situation potentially for yourself or people you care about who also thinks it's comfortable to say the word in certain situations.
I don't think that comfortability exists today where I have to come in here and defend going to a concert and explaining that nobody was upset having it being used when it's that touchy and that sensitive to where people are likely to get called racist for saying they sing along to their favorite rappers. I'd say that that level of comfortability is far from where we're at right now.
Can I just mention this, gang? If you were in the audience, because I think poor 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙, I think, is the only anti-slur person here. I could be wrong, right? We need more people who we need more anti-slur people on. We need more people who are like, no, this wasn't okay. I have a real problem with what was said, right? By 𝕵𝖎𝖎, by Zonia. I have a real problem with people using slurs. So we need more of that. So if you are that, jump backstage, or even if you have just like concerns, right, and questions, we need more of that. Again, I don't want this to turn into a dog pile of 𝕵𝖎𝖎 here.
I'm not pro slur.
I don't think anybody is necessarily dogpiling, and the tough part about my position is we have people who are emotionally charged anytime people use it, and then they get in the whole what happened to Rose, sorry Rose, where there's a whole inconsistency thing between certain words and other words. Is like they don't really have a concrete stance and stand by said stance, which is it's hard to be on this side because once you say, oh, it's okay black people use it, but it's not okay if white people use it, then you're being inconsistent and there's no way to rationale your position. So if you have a position where you say nobody should be using it, you'd be better off in my case where I think nobody should be using it. But if you're in that camp that I said earlier, it's very hard for you to defend your position. I'm just being completely honest.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't. So I have a pretty weird take on this whole situation. I don't think anybody should use the N-word. This is my personal opinion. Either no one can use it or everyone can use it. I don't think we gatekeep words, or a word is so horrible that we just don't use it at all. My opinion.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would
Either-
agree with you,
all bad
but it
or
would still be
they're all good.
context based. You shouldn't be shitty.
Yeah, context based. Yeah.
Well, that was my problem with Rose's take about the birthing person, right? Like, and she said it wasn't related, but it absolutely is to me. In my mind, it was absolutely like core to the point, right? The reason we don't use these words, right, is because it offends people. It makes people feel uncomfortable. It makes people bad. And I personally am of the opinion that you should be polite. I like civility. I like politeness. People can call me soy, all they want for that. But if there is a word or a phrase that is super likely to make the people around you uncomfortable, don't use it. You shouldn't use it. You should be polite. But it's not a morality thing, it's a politeness, if that makes sense, right? There's nothing special about those specific words because you can be impolite in so many different ways. It's just that these specific terms, these specific phrases, have a much higher likelihood to cause offense. That's reality. Whether it should be or not, that is reality. And so if you want to be polite, which I think people should, then you simply don't use these words.
Well, I mean, we want to live in a polite society, but it's kind of a paradox because politeness is at the discretion of the individual, right? I don't legally have to be polite to anyone. I choose to because I understand that a more polite society and a more caring and concerned society and a more empathetic society is better than the antithesis. So in that regard, you can't
respect, because I think the terminology respect is a little bit more coherent because there's no emotion tied to it. Respect is a different thing, and respecting everybody is a lot easier to do.
You can't disentangle emotions from this, though, right? Like you cannot disentangle emotions from how people interact and respond to each other. They are going to have emotional responses. They're going to have emotional reactions to things, and we can understand. You can say it's silly, but you can understand that if someone drops the N-word hard R, people are going to have an emotional response to it, and you can't pretend that they don't or pretend that they shouldn't. It just is going to happen, and you have to take that into account. When people talk about birthing person specifically, or is cis a slur and things, certain people, whether they should or shouldn't, have a visceral emotional response to being called a birthing person. A lot of women have expressed to me that they have a visceral, emotional response of being called a birthing person.
Yeah, they view it as dehumanizing. Vic. Like
they do.
They do.
And so when a woman, right, says, "Hey, I think you're dehumanizing me when you use this term. Please don't use this term to refer to me." And then I see everyone else who has been canceling people over using slurs for as long as I've been alive, right? As long as social media has existed. They've been canceling people for using slurs. Just say, nah, screw you. We're going to call you whatever the hell we want, and you're just going to take it. That's wild to me. It blows my mind. Just the blatant disrespect, how they could just turn on a dime and say, well, these people, their feelings matter, right? We don't use these words towards black people because we know that black people, it hurts them and causes offense. You're expressing that this term causes you offense, but we don't care because you're a bigot and we hate you. That bothers me.
I think it's absolutely childish and borderline stupid to compare the word birthing person to the N-word with the hard. We're saying the word birthing person. We're not even saying what the N-word actually is. Therefore, these two words have two completely different levels of severity.
They have different levels of severity only in the sense that someone is far more likely to be offended by me using the N-word than me using the term. It's not about the level of harm, it's about the potential of harm, and the higher potential that it has, that the N-word has, than the potential that the term birthing person has. I know for a fact that if I drop the N-word, I am almost certainly going to offend everyone around me. I know that for a fact. Maybe not this group of people, but normal people. I know that that's going to happen. Whereas if I use the term birthing person, I don't have that same potential of harm. right? So again, it's not the amount of harm that is done. That's not the issue at play. It's the potentiality for like how likely is this to happen, right? Like how likely is this
You
going
look at
to?
it from like
The
a harm
potential the only reason why that potential exists, that builds up potential energy, shout out physics class. The only reason why that exists is because of historical context in the first place. Birthing person has absolutely no context behind its, usage to make it be a like automatic slur, right? The offensive nature, I definitely could understand from like Anna's perspective. I understand the rationale. So I think, I mean, regardless, we're saying the same thing, but I think for the most part, when it comes down to it, you do have to be consistent in terms of when you're talking about emotionally.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
just
think
to
it's-
address, just real quick, just to address Jenny Burns in my kick chat, who says, tell the insurance companies, doctors, and legislators that have been using it for decades, LOL. I am certain that if you tell your doctor, hey, please call me a woman and not a birthing person, I am absolutely certain that 99 times out of 100, that doctor will say, okay, and just fair and change it up like that, right? They won't make a fuss. And if they do, right, if they refuse and they call you a birthing person regardless of you saying that offends them, then that doctor, there's a problem with that doctor, right? Like that's I judge that doctor for doing that, right?
You can request a different doctor. I mean, that can happen, but it's I don't think that things are going to get to that point. I think if you tell your doctor, hey, look, I'm not a birthing person, I'm a woman, that's perfectly fine. Personally, even though I live in Alabama, which is the most conservative state in America, I've never, even when I was working in hospitals, I'd never heard somebody use the word birthing person. We said mothers.
Alabama might have something to do with it.
Yeah,
Potentially.
I don't think historical precedence is all there is. You say the reason why it's more harmful is because of historical precedence. No, that's the thing that helps the thing that actually does give it the harm. So when somebody says the N-word, it's not just black people that are going to be offended. There's other people, there's other groups of people that will also be offended because they care about the use of that word and how it might affect black people. Whereas birthing person, you actually have people on the opposite end that really want to see this being used. So not only are you not like the odds of you offending somebody, which is going to be like a minority of women, because most of them probably don't even know what that word is. It seems pretty new to me. But you're also going to have there's not going to be a whole lot of people that are like angry about this word at all. Nobody else is going to like jump onto this. It's going to be a very small subset of people that are like interacting with like this kind of politics that really care about it. So it's like the volume and like who else is supporting this cause.
Yeah, not even just that, but I brought this up to somebody in WhickTV Discord a couple weeks ago. Why are we canceling people for opinions and words that no one had or were using 15, 12 years ago? Why? I mean, come on. I think
Control.
that's silly. I mean, but at some point, people's lives are involved here.
I bet it makes you feel real powerful.
Yeah, it makes you feel powerful.
If I get you lose your job because you may be upset.
And you should feel like a jackass. Absolutely. If you're taking somebody's money away from them for an opinion that no one had 10 years ago, I think that you've taken, I think that you become the intolerant person that you wanted to destroy.
So at the very least, we can't be disingenuous at the same time in terms of the reason why it started, because obviously the reason why it started is to make sure that people who did shitty things in the past, i.e. Bill Cosby, i.e. Weinstein, are getting the proper punishment for their actions today based off current standards versus prior standards, right? So they've taken it too far, of course, because cancel culture inherently has become some power thing. I would adhere to what Elder said regarding that. But it did start from a place, which is a lot of these things with the left, if I'm being honest. It did start off a place where I get why it started, but then they kind of take it too far, which is like the problem, right?
Okay, we are not having any anti-slur people step up to the plate, so I might just kind of call this one early. I'll give it another 5-10 minutes, gang. But we need people who disagree, and we're not getting them, right? This was a problem actually putting this together. I cannot express to you how difficult it was to find people who were anti-slur to come on this panel. everyone, even lefties that I won't name their names just in case it offends them, right? The only name I'll name is Heem, right? Is because I already named him a couple episodes ago, saying I was trying to get him on here, where they're like, well, I'm not sure I feel real strongly about this, or I'm not sure I agree that all slurs are bad. I'm not sure I agree that that this is a thing. Like, a lot of people, more than you'd think, personally don't have a problem with slurs, and it's weird to me. It's weird to me because if you
So the
Okay,
problem I see for this is one thing you said, Wick, is that people are saying things like all slurs aren't bad. All slurs are bad. It's just people don't know why they even use it at this point because they're getting incentivized by culture. Right? I'm gonna ask, like, if I ask like you guys on the panel who do use slurs, if I go down the questioning on why you use the slur you use, you're not gonna tell me a satisfying answer. You're gonna tell me, oh, it's because we used it. We just used it. Right? There's no like deep meaning behind you using it. You're just using it because you're conditioned to use it. So
Isn't that just any word though?
I can
Isn't
tell
that
you
just saying,
why I use
this
any
fucking
slurs that
guy?
I've
You
used.
could have just said that man. Well, yeah, sure.
Oh, is Doobie talking? Because your face is not moving. I got confused.
That's not my face. The
Oh,
fuck?
I was so confused when I was looking at. Okay, what were you say?
Oh, isn't that just like any word, right? So like if you were to say, I hate that fucking guy. You could ask me, oh, why did you say fucking and guy? You could have just said, I dislike that man. Right? Sure, I could have said something else, but like,
right?
Well, to be fair, give me a
Yep.
second here. I have a question for you for the rest of the panel. What about phrases? Right, like if I said the phrase "bitches be less capable," would that be a slur?
No, we know what slurs.
No,
are.
but it's
We don't need-
offensive.
Just because it's
No,
negative.
no,
doesn't make it
but
slur. We know
it's
what slurs
offensive
are.
language.
Yeah, just
It's
as
offensive
Hey, how's
language.
bitch not a
language and
slur?
slurs are not the same thing. We know what slurs are. All slurs are bad. Like there's no.
Wait, how is
actual
bitch not a
position you
slur
can
though?
have
I
that
feel like
slurs are good.
that could be considered a slur, right?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
care about
that's-
considered. We know what slurs are, right?
Yeah, bitch is a slur.
Wait, bitches are female dogs.
Yeah, so when you call somebody a bitch, right, you're comparing them to like a woman in a negative way.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Absolutely.
wait, okay, so is retard a slur?
Absolutely.
No, I had a whole panel about it. And then
It's
a
not?
follow-up debate with the opposition winner.
It's
Alright,
obviously
can
a
you just
slur.
give me one sentence to
But, like,
explain
it's
why
fine.
it's not?
Yeah.
I like
Why
using
is
it,
it
but
not?
I would like to. Yeah. I would like to know,
See,
even though I use it a lot.
The most common usage of retard has nothing to do with somebody being actually mentally disabled. It is a word that has taken on.
I care about what it means, right? Because that's what's important,
Well,
right?
I think that's what using a
Right.
word means. When we talk about slurs, the most common use for those words are the harmful thing.
I don't. Just to give
I
my
don't
take
agree
on
with
this real quick, I don't consider it a
Oh.
slur. I don't think retard is a slur.
What
That's
the
why
fuck?
I use it. I just don't think it's a slur.
Wait, hold on. You have a whole row in your Discord server where we can't say retard. We need to say like whatever the fuck
Yeah,
that other
You
shit
know
is.
why I do that? Because it pisses people off when they can't say it, and
I
it's
hate
funny
you.
to me. So, that's really it. But I want to give some space to Jenny. Jenny has graciously
Such a
joined
faggot
us.
sometimes, Wick.
Go ahead.
So I was actually on that debate panel of 𝕭𝖎𝖙, and I, had the same stance. Slurs are inherently insults. Like, why are we looking around for like insults to call each other all of the time and needing to call each other insults all the time? Yeah, it is entertaining. But like, there are all kinds of insults that you can lob at people that don't have all this historic baggage. That, I mean, sometimes they don't hurt, sometimes they hurt worse, but they're not slurs.
Yeah.
When you take away the
I feel
word,
like
people just find another word to use for it.
Go ahead, Gogeta, please.
Yankee is a
but you
slur.
see,
like technically, Yankee is a slur, right? And but when you call an American a Yankee, we don't care. We don't get offended.
Gogeta, please.
Context matters, okay? If I'm with my friends, and here's the thing, this is something I always tell people. This is what I tell people. Whenever you get along with somebody, if you're if you let yourself be truthful to that person, you're not gonna, be this uptight person who's not gonna be able to like cuss in front of them. If you do cuss, right? Because if you use slurs, you're gonna just be you're gonna be yourself around them. So I always tell people, it's like I can tell if you're my friend or not because when I'm able to just say, "What's up, you slut?" Whenever I start saying just like random words and stuff like that, that's kind of like, even though it's a slur, I could use any other like, "Hey, what's up, my faggot?" if I use slurs, right, with you, it's kind of like a bonding thing where it's like I only use them with my very close friends that get the
Why?
context of why
Yeah,
we
it's
use
like a
it with
familiarity
each other.
thing. You're indicating they have like shared experiences.
But you don't
from
use
the
it
same
in
kind of
general.
culture.
You don't
Slurs.
use
You
it in
can't use
public.
different
You don't.
terminology?
Yeah,
Why?
yeah. It's not about okay, but that's
You
that's the
could,
point. Yeah, you
but like
could, but
you
I
also
could.
could
Yeah,
not. Like,
why?
what's the big
Yeah,
deal?
exactly. Yeah, just the same way you say you could not if you don't want to. You don't
Yeah,
have
like
to.
if I were to go to like
My
East
point
LA,
is
right?
you don't have to, right? Go ahead.
And,
Right.
and I'm talking to like somebody from East LA, and I call them a vato or something, right? Like, yeah, what I'm doing there is, yeah, I could use another word, but I'm doing it to signal or to like indicate that there's a shared culture, shared experience, there's
Yeah.
familiarity there. Yeah, so I could use other words, sure. I could just call
What's
him
up,
buddy.
SA?
I call him pal, right? But like, yeah, I could also do other things, right? Like, I don't understand like why I shouldn't.
Right. So when it comes down to this, the reason why I was asking why, if the only reason you're giving me is because it's a sense of camaraderie for friends, then you know what? Sure, I guess. But what it's telling me, one, is that this terminology is being accepted in your friend group, which I think we all contextualize. I think even Doobie contextualize quite a bit. But you're okaying in your friend group, but I also think there's a realization at that same time, because you're contextualizing in your friend group, and the only reason why you would use it in your friend group is that you realize that this terminology, this thing that I'm saying against my close friends, this thing that I'm saying against people I know and care about that are with my shared experience, is not something that is okay to say in natural society. There's the realization.
Yeah, but
And
there's
that's what I said.
that
And that's what I said.
that's
That's
like
what I said
any
at the
other
end.
word.
Cultural. That's why I
Yeah,
said
that's
you
how
don't
it
say it in
should be.
public.
You-
But again, exactly, I
There's
don't.
different there's
Right?
different things
Last
that
time
you
I was here in WhickTV panel, I didn't say any cuss words, right? You know, I respect.
Yeah, so like if I'm talking to my
people.
friend, right, and he says something dumb, and I say, "Okay, retard," and I just like to like dismiss it, right? Yeah, I'm probably not going to say that in a professional setting, right? Of course, right?
Yeah, you're
But
not
I
gonna say it
understand
at work.
we have
Yeah.
he understands that I don't actually mean he's a retard. Or say, "Okay, faggot," or "Fuck off, faggot." I don't mean that he's actually a faggot. I just think he's being a faggot in the moment. Okay, like, it's just like we're friends. We both get it. It's not a big deal,
Well,
right?
it's not
Obviously, I wouldn't use it out of that
Well,
setting.
It's
I mean,
most
but he's
scenarios.
also
Most
hold on, because he's also your friend there, and there is some rapport between you two to the point where you're not saying this to a complete stranger or someone you're even acquainted with, right? You're saying this to a friend, and there's less cause to be offended as a result of that. That makes sense. So I don't think that's in the same category.
It's like me calling my friend, "Hey, what's up, you pussy?"
No,
He's just gonna laugh it off and say, "Ah."
We all understand there are things you say as like friends
Right.
to each other that's completely different.
But culturally,
the biggest
my
point-
point is culturally is becoming a norm to not be a slur. My whole point is that culturally, it's not becoming a slur anymore. Slowly but surely, it's fading away the less power we allow it to have.
I don't.
Hey, really quickly, guys, really quickly.
I don't think you can make.
I want to. Hey, stop! Stop! I want to give space to Jenny. Go ahead.
So I actually have I actually kind of had a thought because first of all, I'm the only woman on this panel, and I'm also like a white woman. So this isn't culturally the norm in my friend groups. Like my friends and I, like back in high school when it was a lot more like subversive and funny to be insulting. Yes, we used to call each other sluts and bitches because you know the teachers would get
Not
mad.
insulting, but it's not insulting
like-
though. Between your
Right,
friends, it's not
but-
insulting.
But
You're
we
right.
grew
You're
out of
right,
it.
bro.
Like we grew out of it. We don't do that anymore. So
I'm very
like
childish.
I'm not
I'm like 14 and
right, but I'm just saying like I'm the reason that I'm looking at this and thinking like this is, this is weird. This is not like culturally normal. And I'm like, wait, but you guys are talking about different cultures than mine. So I'm like, and I'm not talking just like ethnic cultures. I mean, masculine culture in general, because like, we know men and women are different, and we treat like in our friend groups sometimes a little bit different. And women don't tend to insult each other, or like we're not slapping each other's asses on like on the football field. You know what I mean?
Well, one of the reasons as to why women don't insult each other is because they're not as mentally tough or as mentally resilient.
Yeah.
On the studies.
I don't think that's true.
Yo, bro.
I think it's common for men to like bust each other's balls. Okay, it's not a big deal.
Oh,
What I'm
between
saying,
guys?
it's not so much like it's not about toughness. It's about like like different life experiences. Like I use the example of like not slapping each other's asses on like the sports field, because we don't. Like if we're on like we'll tap each other on the back or give each other hugs. Like we're a lot more gentle. As far as like sports goes, like competitiveness goes. And like I notice, like I've always noticed like differences in that sort of thing. So I think it's not so much like cultural differences. Like the cultural difference that I'm seeing is not like race based. It is, gender based.
Oh, but you see, between men, here's my thing. Between men, we can say, bro, you look like shit. Like change that shirt. Hey, put on a hat. Do something with your
we
hair.
do that.
Between guys,
Women
no.
do that
But you
too.
see, no. I have gone to so many parties, and I have a lot of female friends between my actual friend group. Like women, just hey, how you doing? That shirt looks good. They turn around and then say,
No, if
No,
you're
I mean,
bro,
friends,
it feels really
you
bad with
have
that.
to be on it.
to be fair,
Oh,
both
culturally,
genders do it. Technically, I mean, I don't think it's a gender thing personally.
I'm
But
saying guys do it out overtly. They do it in front of everybody. They don't care. Bro, hey, everybody, this guy looks like shit. They'll say it and then they'll all laugh it off.
oh yeah,
Nobody
that's
takes
fair.
it personal.
Yeah.
Nobody takes it personal. But between women, because we're trying to make a difference between men and women, like how they perceive and how they handle it and how they act towards the world. Again, women would like, let's just say two people that knew each other from like 5 years ago, they see each other for the first time. Oh my God, girl, you look so good, this and this. And they won't say anything bad for like the first 30, 40 minutes. Maybe after an hour, they feel comfortable enough to be like, maybe do your hair a different way. They'll say something like that. Guys are so overtly, they're just like, bro, like you need to shave.
Well, have you all ever just real quick, have you all ever
Mhm.
seen the meme? And I said this meme recently of when what women say, what women mean versus what men say, what men mean. So the meme is what women say, "Oh, I love your hair, nice shoes." Then what women mean, "Bitch, slut." And then what men say, "Bitch, slut." And then what men mean, "Oh, I love your hair, I love your shoes." Right? Like it's just a different way of talking, right?
Yeah.
That just sounds like a really shitty friend group. Like because I've never
Fair
experienced.
enough.
Well, outside of like people that I actually didn't like when I was younger, I haven't experienced that as like an actual fucking adult.
Well, that's
So-
fair. It is just
So-
a meme. So.
Overall, my biggest thing
True,
with
but
this,
some memes are like based in reality.
which is also fair. My biggest thing with this, and it coincides with what Poof said earlier, is that there are limits in terms of friend groups based on the rapport and the experiences that you guys were talking about that you can go to that in just natural society, not just professional setting, and like every situation but your friend group that you can't get away with. And we know this. And we know that those things exist. And when it comes to slurs specifically, which is the topic of conversation, we know that once you get past your friend group, that usage, nobody's going to have the context behind your usage. So the value of using that word in any setting without your friend group is basically none. There's no value in using it unless you're trying to be edgy, because nobody's going to understand the context. Nobody's going to have the rapport. And we know the initial implementation, the historical context behind the word is inherently negative. So that's what I'm saying at the end of the day when it comes to using this word.
Because at the end of the day, nobody cares. At the end of the day, nobody cares. So if you're in a bar and somebody says those words behind you, you're not gonna turn around and make an issue out about it. Nobody really cares.
Not
If somebody
everybody.
says the words, yeah, exactly.
Okay,
At the end of the day,
stop. Before we go on. So temperate takes for this panel and this panel only, I am requiring camera. So because
okay.
Because of a Twitch, they'll kick you off if you're like not black and you're saying the N-word.
well, we're not on Twitch, but what I'm saying is if we're going to be using slurs, you're gonna have to put your face with it, right? Like
I was gonna say this really quickly though, Wick. I feel like that's a great test that my buddy up here just brought up. The test of if I said this in a bar, would people turn around and want to fight me, right? So if I said the 14 words, right, like people who know what that means, even though I'm black, would probably take an issue with that. They have an issue with that, right? So to me, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, we feel these things out anyway. We know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, like intuitively. And if you don't, just use the bar test. If I said this in a bar, would I get beat up? If I said this in school, would I get suspended? And if I said this at work, would I get fired?
I don't think the bar test is good. I think, would you say it in front of your kids, or would you allow your kids to say it versus?
I
would
know
you
so
allow
many
your kids to say it in
parents.
front of
I mean,
grandparents?
I'm not a parent, but I know so many parents that they don't care.
Yeah, they look
Okay,
at
And I
curse,
don't.
smoke,
Is
drink.
that a good? Okay,
So
all right.
no. But generationally,
Okay. Is that? I don't know.
hold
if
on.
that's a
Let
good
me
thing,
just say
bro.
this.
I
Hold
don't
up.
know.
I agree with you. It's not a good thing. But here's the thing. Generationally, it becomes more norm to say these things, right? So then when we're old, and then the newer generations, we don't know what's gonna happen with them. But the way that it's trending, most likely is that it's gonna be so normal in the future. A lot
I
of
don't
these
think
things
that's
that
true. I think it was
Yeah.
more normal back. I actually think it was more normal a generation
No,
like
I'm
a
talking
while
about the power.
ago.
No, but I'm talking about what you said before, like taking away the power. I'm talking about what you said. You said you want to take away the power. I'm saying it's gonna become so normalized and so like chill to use it that it's gonna have no
I
power.
wanna
Everybody's gonna look at it in a good light instead
Yeah.
of looking at it in a bad light.
I want to give
That's what
some
I'm referring to.
I want to give some space to Temperate Takes to have maybe some temperate takes on this. Have you been watching the show?
Okay.
What are your thoughts here? What are your takes on slurs in general, etc.?
All right. So, this is more of a personal experience, so it's a little anecdotal. But for me, is I grew up 20 miles south of DC. So it was a very racially integrated area. It was, I mean, by the time I was in high school, I think it was like it was pretty much an even 50-50 between whites and blacks. And then there's probably a good portion of Latinos in there too. But for me personally, growing up as a white person, is using slurs was like one of the, like, if I called somebody a slut or a bitch, like I would get smacked in the mouth for it because you don't say that. But me actually using any kind of a racial slur, that would get me beat. Like that would get me taken into a back room and beat for it because you did not say that in our neighborhoods. We had neighbors that if they heard or saw us using that sort of language, that of course it looked bad on the whole family because then all of a sudden the neighborhood is like, oh, they're a bunch of redneck cake bigots. You can be shitty to them because they're assholes. So, and I know that's not a general experience for most people, but that was my personal experience growing up. Was slurs had so much more connotation to them coming from a white person because they were so connected to being a racist, to racism, to bigotry. And if you use them as a white person, that automatically labeled you as that thing.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
that's a great point, and I do think something needs to be said in terms of like the people we're using on the panel. And I'm just pointing this out, like 𝕵𝖎 and even you, 𝕵𝖎, like you guys are at the very least colored because there's a different aspect when white people use it versus.
It
like,
wouldn't have
people
mattered
color.
about my skin color. I'm just gonna tell you right now. I get I'm Latino, and then like
But I'm talking
Latinos
about
sometimes get a pass.
general
If I was
society.
white, I understand, but I'm saying just it doesn't matter if I'm Latino. I'm saying if I was whatever race and I grew up where I did, it's culturally for me, right? I grew up around black people, around Latinos, around Asians. In my school, I was teaching all the bad words in Spanish to like wherever the fuck I could. Like it's one of those things where you grow up with these people, and it's just part of one of those things. Hey, what's up, cabrón?
Right.
You're
Right,
just
and it's
in there.
culturally a part of your upbringing. I grew up in
Yeah.
I grew up in Utah.
But it's not because of my skin color. It's not because of my
So
skin
what I
color.
think is happening is
Because
that
in
there
high
are
school,
people.
It's not a part of my culture. Like it wasn't a part of my culture because like the brownest people that we had in my town were just tan.
Yeah, and maybe
So-
like square dancing's part of your culture, not part of my culture, right? So like,
Literally is, yes.
yeah. So like, so this is just like, hey, in the place where we grew up, where I don't know where 𝕵𝖎 grew up, but where I grew up in fucking East LA, everybody used all the slurs, right? And I've trouble even calling them slurs because I don't think like nigga is an actual slur, right? I don't think vato or way are slurs, right?
No.
Yeah, I guess there's like a history there.
It's like saying homeboy.
Even like maricón, right? It's calling
What's up,
someone like a
my nigga?
maricón. I guess that's like you're calling them gay or something. But like when you're
Yeah.
with your friends and calling one of them maricón, like it doesn't mean that they're actually like insulting them for being gay, right? Like it's just like a playful thing that you do.
Well, Gringo's probably the best example of all of that.
So like I think yeah, this is just like a cultural clash thing, right? And what we're saying is that, hey, this is part of our culture. We understand that in your culture, there are like implications and there are like, there's history, there's baggage that you guys are clinging to. We're not clinging to that baggage.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not clinging to it.
Right.
And I don't think, and I think that,
hold up.
And
as a
I
Latino,
think that's
people can say you're a wetback. I've heard it when I was younger. I have never looked at somebody weird like, why? I have never done that because again, they're words, and only I can give them like that meaningful.
it's more insulting
pain.
being called a paisa. Okay, that's more insulting.
Yeah. No, but you see, paisa can be used as a good or a bad word. What's
Yeah,
up,
I know,
paisa?
but,
Like,
but
you
for
say,
me,
"What's up?"
that'd be more insulting. Okay,
Yeah.
but I think for I think that saying elbow, there's like a more context. There's more connotation when a white person says it. I think that's actually like you're basically handing power over to racist white people, saying, hey, if you say this word, it has so much more power. Well, no, just say, hey, fuck it. It has no power when anybody says it.
Okay, $5 from Omar. And gang, just before we continue, I'm gonna need more donations if we want to keep this going on. So if you like this content, you need to give me more money so we can keep going, whether it be on Kick or on YouTube, because we're not streaming on Twitch today. Remember, subs, super chats, all that helps out. But Omar for $5 asks, my father was a black Arab and my mother was a light-skinned/white Arab. Do I qualify to use the N-word?
So sure, why not? I mean, you could have been a white guy from Germany. I don't care.
Darius is giving you the pass. There you go.
Lisa wanted me to shout her out for being a real nigga. I don't know why, Lisa, but there you go. There's your shout out. Yeah.
So the problem here is like, I feel like people like 𝕵𝖎𝖎, people like Poof, you guys are, understanding that the word has no power. But we got to be honest on terms of how things are going to happen when it's put out in society as a whole. Use, like, for example, I'm not calling you out, Poof, but when you say someone, oh, you have the pass and the N-word, and then they go into a public setting and then they say the N-word, to assume that their culture in that situation is going to understand the context based off, you being a black Arab is making a lot of assumptions versus something you.
So growing up in East Alabama, the only people who quote unquote could not say the word were white people, Asians, Hispanics, blacks, most other people, Arabs. We didn't care if they used the word, right? But because of historic context here in America, it was understood that even white people understood, like, hey, I don't use the word, I don't care, right? That white people did not use that word. But personally, in adulthood, I realized, if we gatekeep this word, we give it power, right?
Yep.
And once you give words power, you become a powerless people, right? And I think we all understand what happens when you're begging for handouts, when and you are perpetually bottom feeders in society, and you are a powerless people. I don't want to go back to that.
Right, and I definitely agree to that. But all in all, what I'm saying is that the precedent we're setting in terms of like allowing people to say certain words and thinking that, hey, maybe certain cultures will allow it or think it's okay is a foolish idea. Instead of one, not using the word in entirety and not avoiding those situations in entirety, and two, just understanding
It's
that
here, but in reality, it's here, right? The word is here. People
no,
use
it's
it.
not. It's not here because
It's
a lot
here.
of people. No, it's not. It's not here. There's definitely. I would say in this current society, it's more taboo to say the N-word versus like even 10 years ago.
I disagree. I think we've gotten to the point now in society to where these Gen Z
People get more offended.
Hold on.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's more taboo because of now. Because of how
Well, I
people
want
get
to.
easily
Okay,
offended.
so you made your Riddell, you've made your argument that you think it's more taboo now than it ever has been before. Is that your argument? To be clear?
Yes.
Okay, it's more taboo now than it was before.
Not
𝕵𝖎𝖎
obviously back
and
in the day,
Darius.
but,
Oh
like,
yeah, elaborate on that a little bit. But then I want a Darius and 𝕵𝖎𝖎 who disagree to tell me why. I'm curious.
Right. So I'm not gonna be hyperbolic and say it's like the most taboo it's ever been. But at the very least, since like I was alive, I'll at least put that in perspective. Since like '97, I would say this version, from my understanding from when I lived in '97, it's been, and nowadays it's more taboo since then. So I'll kind of point it out that way.
You young whippersnappers who were born in '97, and I was born in like '94, making me feel old here. I just turned 29.
3 years.
And-
What? He said,
Yeah.
"What?"
I'm gonna talk about 1980s. Sit down.
Don't go there.
Yeah, like
You say
okay,
it's a child's
kids.
place, but either way it goes, right?
Children.
So based upon everything that I've seen, these Gen Z black kids, these Gen Z white kids who are growing up, they don't care as much about this word as we think they do. That word has lost a lot of power. Even it lost power amongst like younger millennials. Like, what are we talking about here? I don't think from my observations, I don't have any empirical data to back this up, that the N-word is any more taboo than it was, hell, even 10 years ago, let alone 30 or 40 years ago. Right?
Yeah.
The difference between the difference between 10 years ago and now, I guess, like just to kind of put that into perspective, is that 10 years ago people understood that we're just bullshitting. Like everybody understood. Whoever you talk to, it's kind of like a mutual thing where we're just bullshitting, nobody's taking it seriously, and everybody's more sensitive. So that's what I was referring to, where I disagree with you, because I think right now it's just people getting more offended, even though the climate is the same. The climate has never changed. It's just people's offense to the climate has changed.
I think you're like half right. I think that
I don't know.
Yeah, what we're actually seeing is I'm sorry, just really quickly. So I think what we're actually seeing is so we just saw it here, right? So we have people from cultural backgrounds who 10, 15 years ago weren't able to speak as easily, right? Now they're able to speak, and they're able to listen to the way that each other communicates. And yeah, there are a lot of people growing up in the cities who aren't black who use these words. And for white people who are growing up in places where it's totally unacceptable for them to even consider saying it, yeah, they're going to hear them like, oh shit, this person must be a racist. This person must be using it in a derogatory way because, I could never say that growing up. Well, yeah, we just have a different culture.
Yeah. I agree with that.
The context and who is saying it is so important.
Yes. And like, I was just thinking of something like, so I grew up with like NWA, Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, everybody thrown around like the hard R in rap music. I never said it because like it wasn't my word, but like I grew up with people who would, roll down the street or roll down the road, because we don't have streets in the country. Roll down the road shouting, all the lyrics to the words, because it wasn't as taboo, but at the same time, like I knew it wasn't appropriate because I was raised to not say it. But like looking at things now, these same people who have been all of these years going down the road shouting all the lyrics to their favorite rap music, who are white, are mad when they're being called out. I think that is a part of this, because like they've been doing it all these years, nobody had a problem with it, and now we're just like, maybe no, maybe don't do that. So I do think that is a part of, at least from like the white person's perspective, I think that is a huge part of it.
Yeah, I think it's the clash of white guilt and black victim mentality, to be honest.
Fair enough.
I mean, I would say it, like when I was raised not to say the word, it wasn't because of guilt. It was just like, there's got this historical context. Right. It's got this historical text, and yes, black people can use it because it was used against them, and like it wasn't used against you. So like, pick a different fucking word.
Okay, gang. We have kind of reached the end of things here. We are going to end the stream, but if you enjoyed today's content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're on Quick, feel free to give me a follow if you haven't yet. Throw me some subs, that would be great. Throw me some super chats, that would be great. What we got coming up next week? Next week on Monday, we're going to be having on Brittany Simon and some others to talk about male loneliness. Is it really a problem that we should be discussing? Is it really something that, matters? Why are we focusing on that and not more important issues, perhaps? We're going to talk about it. It'll be an interesting discussion. Wednesday, we're going to be talking with P.F. Young about the recent issues in South Africa with the kill the Boers, kill the white people, kill the white farmers, all that. $20 from Lawson Harrison. I dream of a world where the N-word means to everyone what it means to me, hitting my thumb with my hammer. Thank you. Okay. I don't know what else we got coming up next week. My schedule's going to be a little different next week. We'll see. But Monday and Wednesday are what I got in the bag. 6 o'clock Eastern. See you then.
Cool.
Peace out, Girl Scouts.
See ya.
Bye.